Welcome to the Crime for Sleep channel. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Story 1. I remember the first time I walked through that house. The floorboards whispered beneath my feet, each creak a secret being told, then hushed. The air hung still, thick with dust motes that danced reluctantly in the thin beams of light filtering through age-smudged windows. It was late October when I began investigating the Elainer Walsh case, a case that would later become known in our department simply as the House. The two-story Victorian sat back from the road, partially obscured by untended maple trees whose leaves had turned the color of dried blood. The porch sagged slightly to the left, as if the house itself was leaning away from whatever presence lingered inside. I paused at the threshold, my hand resting on the cool brass doorknob, listening to the silence that seemed somehow deliberate, watching. Elainer Walsh had purchased the property 3 months prior. A successful graphic designer from the city, she'd been looking for solitude, space to breathe after her divorce. A fresh start, her sister Meredith had told me, her voice catching slightly over the phone. She loved that house from the moment she saw it online, said it was calling to her. Inside, the house retained its original character, ornate crown molding, hardwood floors worn smooth by generations of footsteps, wallpaper faded into ghostly patterns. I moved from room to room, the late afternoon light growing dimmer with each passing minute. My footsteps echoed softly through the empty spaces. The realtor had informed us the previous owners had moved out decades ago, leaving the house in the hands of a property management company that had done little beyond ensuring the roof didn't leak. Nothing seemed immediately out of place. A coffee mug sat on the kitchen counter, half full, a ring of lipstick on its rim. A novel lay open on the sofa, face down, holding its reader's place. Elainer's laptop sat closed on the dining room table, plugged in, charging. These were the ordinary traces of a life suddenly interrupted, but nothing that explained why Elainer Walsh had disappeared without a trace 17 days ago. I made my way upstairs, my hand sliding along the smooth wooden banister. 5 steps up, I paused, feeling a slight resistance beneath my palm, a small imperfection in the wood, a notch. Looking closer, I saw initials carved there. E.W. Elainer's perhaps, marking her territory in this new home. The carving looked old, though, the edges softened by time and countless hands. Second floor held 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. Elainer had claimed the master bedroom at the end of the hall. Her bed was made, hospital corners tight, decorative pillows arranged with precision. The closet door stood ajar, revealing clothes hanging in color-coordinated sections. On the nightstand, a glass of water, a small clock, reading glasses folded neatly beside a journal. Nothing unusual, except for the thin film of dust beginning to settle on everything, marking the days of her absence. It was the narrow door at the end of the hallway that drew my attention. It opened to reveal a steep staircase leading up to what I presumed was the attic. I switched on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness ahead of me. The air grew noticeably colder as I ascended, each step groaning under my weight, announcing my intrusion. The attic stretched the length of the house, ceiling sloping sharply on either side. Unlike the rest of the well-kept home, this space remained untouched by renovation. Bare rafters crossed overhead, exposed insulation peeked through in places. My flashlight beam cut across forgotten furniture draped in sheets, boxes stacked in precarious towers, the forgotten detritus of previous lives. In the far corner, something caught my eye, a small desk, antique, with a roll top open to reveal scattered papers. Unlike everything else in the attic, this area was dust-free, recently disturbed. Elainer had been here, sitting on this small wooden chair, examining these documents. I approached slowly as if she might still be there, invisible, watching me discover what she had found. The papers were yellowed with age, some crumbling at the edges. I carefully lifted the top sheet, a letter dated September 12, 1973. My dearest Alina, it began, I dream of you still, though you are not yet of this world. I've prepared this place for you as I promised. When you finally arrive, everything will be as it should. It was signed simply W. My hands trembled slightly as I set it aside and picked up the next document, a deed to the house, dated 1974, listing the owner as William Thorne in trust for Alina Walsh. I checked the date again, calculating quickly. Alina Walsh would not be born for another 15 years when this deed was created. Beneath these papers lay a small leather-bound journal. Opening it revealed page after page of detailed observations, all addressed to Alina. Descriptions of the house, the grounds, the town. Notes about Alina's preferences, her habits, her dreams. Things no one could possibly know about an unborn child. Today you would have enjoyed the garden, one entry read, dated June 1980. The lilacs you'll one day plant are blooming beautifully. Lilacs grew along the eastern side of the house now. Alina had indeed planted them, according to her sister, during her first week of ownership. The final item on the desk was a manila folder. Inside, photographs, black and white, then color, documenting the house through decades. And in every image, barely perceptible at first but unmistakable once noticed, a small female figure, face always slightly blurred or turned away. The same figure, unchanging through 40 years of photographs. On the back of each photo, written in faded ink, Alina comes home. My phone buzzed in my pocket, startling me. The text from my partner read, "Found something. Birth certificate shows Alina Walsh was adopted. Birth mother unknown. Birth father listed as William Thorne." A gust of wind rattled the attic windows, sending a shower of maple leaves against the glass. The temperature seemed to drop further, my breath now visible in the beam of my flashlight. I gathered the documents carefully, placing them in an evidence bag, my mind racing through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Alina Walsh had never known she was adopted. She had never known her birth father had once owned this house. She had never known he had waited for her, prepared for her, anticipated her arrival decades in advance. Had never known until she found these documents herself, just as I had. What happens when you discover your life has been orchestrated from before your birth? When the random choice that led you to buy an old Victorian house turns out to be anything but random. When the fresh start you thought you were making turns out to be a return. It took us another week to locate Alina Walsh. We found her staying in a small motel 2 towns over, registered under her maiden name. She sat very still as I explained what we'd discovered, her face expressionless, eyes focused on some middle distance. "I knew he was watching me," she said finally. "From the moment I moved in, I could feel him waiting." "William Thorne," I asked, "your birth father?" She smiled thinly. "He's not my father. He wanted me to think that, but I remembered, you see. Once I found those papers, I started to remember." "Remember what, Ms. Walsh?" "I lived in that house before, a long time ago. William took something from me then. He's been waiting for me to come back to reclaim it." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But I found it first. I found what he hid." We never discovered what Alina believed she had found. She refused to elaborate, refused to return to the house, refused psychiatric evaluation. Eventually, she moved across the country, changing her name, starting over again. The house remains empty now. The property was transferred to the state after investigators determined William Thorne had died in 1992. No living relatives could be located. The investigation into his life revealed little. A reclusive man, independently wealthy, with an interest in the occult and a history of psychiatric hospitalizations. Sometimes I drive past that house on my way home. The maple trees have grown fuller, almost completely obscuring the view from the road now. But in the upstairs window, occasionally, I catch a glimpse of something, a movement, a shadow, a watching presence. I keep the case file in my desk drawer, unable to label it solved, unable to forget the chill of that attic, the precision of those documents, the certainty in Alina's voice when she said, "I lived in that house before." And sometimes, late at night, I wonder what was it she found? What had William Thorne hidden away, waiting for her return? What drew her to that house across decades, across lifetimes perhaps? The answers, I suspect, remain in that house, waiting, patient as dust, for Elena Walsh to come home again. Story 2, I remember the first time I stepped into the Blackwood estate, my footsteps echoing through emptiness that shouldn't have been there. The mansion stood on the outskirts of town, a Victorian relic that had weathered nearly a century and a half of history. My breath formed small clouds in the autumn air as I approached the site, notepad in hand, the weight of my recorder heavy in my coat pocket. My name is Detective Morgan Hayes, and I specialize in cases that defy explanation. The construction foreman had called our precinct that morning, his voice trembling slightly despite his obvious attempt to maintain composure. I'd heard fear disguised as confusion many times before. The room, it rebuilt itself overnight, he had said, each word measured as if testing their reality as he spoke them. Everything we tore down yesterday is back, exactly the same, but different. The estate had been purchased by a developer after sitting vacant for nearly 20 years following the death of its last owner, Elena Blackwood, an eccentric heiress who had no living relatives. The plan was to gut the interior and transform the historic property into luxury apartments while preserving the fa-a-de. As I ducked under the yellow caution tape strung across the grand entrance, the foreman, a stocky man named Jim with calloused hands and 30 years of construction experience etched into the lines around his eyes, met me in what had once been a foyer. His crew stood in a loose cluster nearby, nobody speaking above a whisper. "Second floor, east wing," Jim said, not bothering with pleasantries. "We finished demolition in that section 2 days ago, took everything down to the studs." I followed him up a grand staircase that creaked beneath our weight, its ornate banister covered in a fine layer of construction dust. The air smelled of old wood, plaster, and something else, something almost like lavender, but sharper, medicinal. "The crew left at 6 yesterday evening," Jim continued as we reached the landing. "Site was secured, alarm set. When we arrived this morning at 7, the alarm was still active, no signs of entry, but that room." He trailed off, pointing down a long hallway lined with doors in various states of removal. At the end of the hall stood one door that looked different from the others, intact, polished, with an antique brass doorknob that gleamed as if recently cleaned. Jim hesitated before it, then gestured for me to open it myself. The door swung open with surprising ease, without the squeak of old hinges I had expected. What I saw inside made me stop in the doorway, my fingers instinctively tightening around my notepad. The room was completely furnished, as if untouched by the demolition that had stripped the rest of the house bare. A four-poster bed with crisp white linens occupied the center of one wall. A writing desk stood beneath a window with heavy velvet curtains drawn closed. A Persian rug covered hardwood floors that had been refinished to a warm glow. A crystal decanter containing amber liquid sat on a small side table, alongside a single glass. "Everything was gone yesterday," Jim whispered from behind me. We had removed the flooring, stripped the wallpaper, taken out all the fixtures. It was down to bare joists and studs. I stepped fully into the room, feeling a subtle shift in temperature, warmer here than in the hallway, as if the room had been gently heated. My detective's eye scanned for inconsistencies, for signs of a prank or elaborate hoax, but found none. The room didn't just appear untouched by demolition. It looked freshly decorated, as if prepared for an honored guest. "Has anyone touched anything?" I asked, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "Only this," Jim said, approaching the writing desk. "We found it open to this page." On the desk lay an elegant leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age but the ink appearing fresh and wet. I leaned closer, careful not to disturb anything, and read the neat, flowing script. October 12th, they arrived today with their machines and their plans. Jim worried about the stability of the east wall. Mike suggested reinforcing the foundation first. Sarah found the photograph behind the pantry wallpaper and slipped it into her pocket when she thought no one was looking. I looked up sharply. "Who are Mike and Sarah?" Jim's face had gone pale. "My crew. Mike Donovan is my structural engineer. Sarah Chen is our preservationist consultant." "And did Sarah find a photograph yesterday?" Jim nodded slowly. "Behind the kitchen wallpaper. I didn't see her take it, but..." I turned back to the journal, flipping carefully to the next entry. October 13th, they tore at my walls today, stripped away my skin. Jim stood in this very spot and said, "This section will make a beautiful master suite." They left at sunset, covered in my dust, but I remember, I always remember. The handwriting was the same throughout, elegant and precise, a woman's hand, I thought, though that was merely an assumption. I continued reading, aware of Jim's nervous breathing behind me. October 14th, they will return tomorrow to find me whole again. They will not understand, they never do. This is my 43rd renovation. I endure, I rebuild. I remember every face, every name, every conversation whispered within my walls. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. 43rd renovation. The house had been built in 1879. It couldn't have undergone that many complete renovations in its lifetime. "Jim," I said quietly, "do you know the history of this house? Any stories about previous construction projects?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Just rumors. 3 different companies have tried to renovate this place in the last 2 decades. All of them abandoned the projects. Financial issues, they said, but there were stories." "What kind of stories?" "Tools disappearing, plans changing overnight, workers quitting without explanation." He paused. "One crew claimed they'd finished demolishing a room only to find it restored the next morning. Everyone thought they were making excuses for falling behind schedule." I turned to the final entry in the journal. October 15th, the detective will arrive today. Morgan Hayes, methodical, skeptical, will notice the lavender scent, Eliner's favorite, will open this journal, will read these words, will not believe at first. But I know you, Morgan. I've waited for someone who would listen, who would understand. I am not the house. I am what lives within its walls, and I have so many stories to tell you. Today was October 15th. The lavender scent I'd noticed earlier now seemed to intensify around me. I closed the journal with trembling fingers and turned to Jim. "I'd like everyone to clear the property," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Tell them it's a potential crime scene." After Jim had ushered his bewildered crew outside, I returned to the room alone. I sat at the edge of the perfectly made bed, the mattress yielding beneath my weight as if recently stuffed and stitched. The silence of the house pressed in around me, not the silence of emptiness, but the weighted quiet of someone holding their breath, waiting. "Who are you?" I asked the empty room, feeling both foolish and frightened. No answer came, but as I watched, the glass beside the decanter moved just slightly, just enough to catch the light differently. Nobody had touched it. As I stared, transfixed, a fresh line of ink appeared in the open journal, forming words in the same elegant script. "I am the memory of this house, and you are the first to ask the right question. I've been investigating the Blackwood estate for 3 weeks now. The construction has been officially halted pending my investigation. I return to that room each day, and each day the journal contains new entries, stories of the families who lived here, of conversations held in secret, of joys and tragedies witnessed by silent walls. I haven't told anyone about the writing that appears while I watch, about the furniture that subtly rearranges itself when I look away, about the way the room seems to know things about me that no one could possibly know. The official report remains open. Unexplained phenomena I've written, possible elaborate hoax, investigation continuing. But in the quiet of night, when I'm alone with my thoughts, I know what's happening at the Blackwood estate isn't a crime to be solved. It's a conversation with something that has existed between the spaces of our understanding, something that rebuilds itself no matter how many times we try to tear it down. And sometimes in my dreams I hear a woman's voice whisper, "Memory cannot be demolished. It only rebuilds itself again and again until someone finally notices." Story 3. I remember the day Jessica Harlow moved into apartment 4B with perfect clarity. It was a mild September afternoon, the kind where golden light filters through half-bare trees, casting long shadows across brick and concrete. The moving truck had departed hours earlier, leaving her alone with towers of brown boxes and the promise of a fresh start. I watched her through my office window across the street, cataloging details as I always do mid-30s, shoulder-length auburn hair, practical clothing, efficient movements. A teacher, perhaps, or a librarian, someone organized, someone starting over. As the department's lead detective on neighborhood disturbances, I'd grown accustomed to learning the rhythms of our small community. The Willowbrook apartments weren't known for trouble A 6-story pre-war building with reasonable rent and quiet tenants. Most residents stayed for years. Turnover was unusual enough to catch my attention. 3 days after Jessica moved in, I received the first call. Mrs. Abernathy from 4A, voice trembling slightly, concerned about noises from the adjacent apartment late at night. Not from the new tenant, she clarified. From 4C, the man who lives there, there's something not right about him. I made a note, promised to look into it. Odd, considering 4C should border Jessica's apartment on the other side. The building had an unusual layout, 4A and 4C flanking 4B like sentinels. A week passed, Jessica settled in, establishing routines: morning coffee at Westside Cafe, evening walks through Oakdale Park, grocery shopping on Sundays. I noted these patterns absently, professional habit rather than focused surveillance. Then came the second call, this time from Mr. Patel in 4D, directly across the hall. Detective Morgan, he began, his voice hushed as though sharing a secret. I'm concerned about the gentleman in 4C. He keeps unusual hours, paces at night. Sometimes I hear him talking to himself through the walls. Again, I promised to investigate, though building management confirmed all residents were in good standing. No complaints had been filed against the tenant in 4C. 2 weeks after Jessica's arrival, I received my third call from Jessica herself. Her voice carried a forced calm that immediately put me on alert. Detective Morgan, the building super gave me your number. I need to report something strange. We arranged to meet at a quiet corner table in Westside Cafe later that afternoon. Jessica arrived precisely on time, sliding into the chair across from me with controlled movements that couldn't quite mask her unease. Steam rose from her untouched coffee in lazy spirals as she gathered her thoughts. Everyone keeps warning me about him, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. About who? I asked, though I already suspected. My neighbor in 4C, she wrapped her fingers around her mug, seeking warmth. Mrs. Abernathy mentioned him first, said to keep my door locked. Then Mr. Patel cautioned me not to be alone in the elevator with him. The super gets uncomfortable whenever I bring him up. I nodded, encouraging her to continue. I've never actually seen him though, 3 weeks living there and our paths haven't crossed once. She leaned forward slightly, but sometimes I think I hear something, like someone's in the hallway just outside my door. When I check, there's never anyone there. I made notes in my small leather-bound notebook, the pages making a soft whisper as they turned. Have you noticed anything else unusual? Mail deliveries, packages. Jessica shook her head. That's another thing. There's no name on the mailbox for 4C. When I asked the super about it, he just mumbled something about respecting privacy. That evening I made an unofficial visit to the Willowbrook. The building exhaled the day's warmth into the cooling night air, its yellow windows like drowsy eyes preparing for sleep. The lobby smelled faintly of furniture polish and old radiators. I checked the mailboxes 4A Abernathy, 4B Harlow, 4D Patel, but 4C remained blank, its little window revealing an empty compartment behind. The elevator hummed softly as it carried me to the 4th floor, depositing me into a hallway illuminated by soft, amber sconces. Apartments 4A and 4B faced each other on the left side of the corridor, while 4D stood alone on the right. Between 4B and 4D was a stretch of uninterrupted wall where, logically, 4C should be. But there was no door. I traced my fingers along the wallpaper, looking for inconsistencies, hidden entrances, anything to explain the residents' shared delusion. Finding nothing, I knocked on Jessica's door. She appeared immediately, as though she'd been waiting just on the other side. Detective Morgan, please come in. Her apartment was neat but lived in, boxes unpacked, a few personal touches already in place, framed photographs, well-worn books, a hand-knitted throw across the sofa. Large windows overlooked the quiet street below, evening light painting the hardwood floors in warm amber. I'd like to see your apartment layout, I explained, specifically which walls you share with your neighbors. Jessica nodded, leading me through the space. This wall connects to Mrs. Abernathy's apartment, she said, gesturing to the left, and this one. She hesitated, pointing to the right. This would be 4C, I suppose. I pressed my palm against the wall, solid, no unusual vibrations or sounds, and you've heard noises from this side. Yes, footsteps sometimes. Once I thought I heard singing very faint, like an old record playing. That night I requested the building plans from city records. The original 1930s blueprints showed 4 apartments per floor, just as expected. But a renovation permit from 1967 revealed a modification apartment 4C had been absorbed into 4B, creating one larger unit. According to official records, there hadn't been a 4C for over 50 years. Yet the residents spoke of its occupant with such certainty. I returned to the Willowbrook the following evening, this time with Jessica's permission to remain in her apartment after she left for her night class. The space felt different without her presence, emptier, quieter, shadows gathering in corners as daylight faded. I positioned myself in an armchair facing the wall that supposedly separated her apartment from 4C. For 2 hours, nothing happened. The building settled around me with ordinary creaks and sighs. Pipes hummed with circulating water. Outside, occasional cars passed, their headlights briefly illuminating patterns on the ceiling before sliding away. Then at 8:17 p.m., I heard footsteps on the other side of the wall, steady, deliberate steps that moved from one end to the other. I pressed my ear against the plaster. The footsteps stopped. Then, so close it might have been in the room with me, a man's voice. "She'll learn, they always do." I jerked back from the wall, heart racing. The voice had been clear, without the muffling effect one would expect through solid construction. Before I could process this, Jessica's key turned in the lock. She entered, looking surprised to find me standing against the wall. "Detective, is everything all right?" I composed myself. "How was your class?" "Cancelled," the professor emailed just as I arrived on campus. She set down her bag, watching me carefully. "Did something happen?" I hesitated, weighing how much to share. "I heard something," I admitted, "a voice." Her face paled. "What did it say?" "Nothing important," I lied. "Just confirming there's someone there, or something that creates that impression." Jessica wrapped her arms around herself. "What do we do now?" "We confront it," I said, decision made. "Tonight." The super was reluctant to help until I mentioned possible structural issues that could lead to liability. He arrived with a ring of jangling keys and a portable work light that cast harsh shadows across his weathered face. "There's nothing to find," he insisted as we stood in the hallway. "Been working here 30 years. There's no apartment 4C. "Then you won't mind opening up this wall to prove it," I countered. He muttered under his breath but began examining the wall between apartments 4B and 4D after several minutes. His fingers caught on something, a nearly invisible seam in the wallpaper. He pressed, and a section of wall recessed slightly. "What the hell?" he whispered. With shaking hands, he inserted a thin metal tool into the gap. A soft click echoed in the quiet hallway, and a door-sized panel swung inward, revealing darkness beyond. The super backed away. "This isn't possible. This was sealed off decades ago." I clicked on my flashlight and stepped through the opening, Jessica close behind me despite my gestured warning to stay back. The beam of light cut through thick darkness, revealing a space that mirrored her apartment in size but contained only dust, cobwebs, and emptiness. No furniture, no occupant, just bare floors and peeling wallpaper. "There's nothing here," Jessica whispered, relief evident in her voice. I moved my flashlight methodically across the space, noting details: no footprints in the dust except our own, no signs of recent habitation. In the far corner, something gleamed dully, a small brass mailbox key on a faded ribbon. As I bent to retrieve it, a cold draft brushed past us, carrying a whisper so faint I wasn't sure I'd actually heard it. "I don't live here, but you do." Jessica gasped, "Did you hear that?" Before I could answer, my flashlight beam caught something on the far wall, a faded photograph in a simple frame. I approached it slowly, aware of Jessica behind me, her breathing quick and shallow. The photograph showed a young woman standing in front of the Willowbrook apartments, smiling nervously at the camera. She wore clothes from another era, late 1960s, perhaps, but what made my blood run cold was her face, identical to Jessica's in every detail. On the back of the frame, written in faded ink, Elizabeth Harlow, 4B, 1967. Jessica stared at the photograph, her face a mask of confusion. That's my grandmother. She lived here briefly before moving west. That's why I chose this building family connection. But I don't understand. Why is her picture here?" The super, who had finally gathered the courage to join us, shook his head. Elizabeth Harlow was the tenant who requested the renovation. She paid to have 4C sealed off, claimed the man living there was harassing her, but there was no tenant registered for 4C even then. As he spoke, the temperature in the room dropped noticeably. The hidden door we'd entered through slowly began to close despite no one being near it. "We need to leave, now." I grabbed Jessica's arm, pulling her toward the narrowing exit. We barely made it through before the panel clicked shut, the seam once again nearly invisible. The three of us stood in the hallway, breathing heavily, staring at the unbroken expanse of wall. Jessica was the first to speak. "He's still there, isn't he? Whatever drove my grandmother to seal off that space." I had no answer for her, only questions multiplying in my mind. 2 days later, Jessica moved out of apartment 4B, leaving most of her possessions behind in her haste to escape. The building's manager listed the apartment again immediately, eager to replace the lost income. I drive past the Willowbrook occasionally, watching the windows of the 4th floor. Sometimes, late at night, I see a light in 4B when I know it's vacant. And sometimes, I think I catch a glimpse of a figure standing at the window, not Jessica, but someone else, someone waiting. Waiting for the next tenant who doesn't know about the neighbor who isn't there. The neighbor who whispers through walls that shouldn't exist. The neighbor who reminds each new resident of a chilling truth. "I don't live here, but you do." Story 4. I remember the first time I saw the canvas in Eliza Harmon's apartment, hanging slightly crooked on her living room wall. It wasn't the blank canvas itself that struck me as unusual. Many people have unfinished art projects. It was the way she spoke about it, her voice dropping to a whisper as she told me it had been blank when she hung it, but now contained the faintest outline of a house. I nodded politely, assuming she had forgotten starting the painting herself. That was 6 months ago, before she disappeared. Now I stand in that same apartment, the yellow police tape creating geometric patterns across the doorway. The morning light filters through partially closed blinds, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. The apartment is silent except for the occasional creak of the old building settling and the distant sound of traffic filtering up from 7 floors below. The air feels thick with dust and something else, anticipation, perhaps, or secrets. I'm Detective Sarah Caldwell with the Oak Ridge Police Department's Cold Case Unit. Eliza's case isn't technically cold yet, but after 3 months without leads, it's landing on my desk. I specialize in the cases that haunt other detectives, the ones that keep them awake at night, staring at ceilings and wondering what they missed. The apartment has been processed, of course. Forensics went through everything meticulously in those first crucial days, but I like to see things with fresh eyes, to absorb the environment where someone last existed before they vanished from the world. Sometimes the spaces speak to me in ways that reports cannot. My gaze drifts naturally to the canvas still hanging on the wall. It's no longer blank, not by any stretch of the imagination. The painting is nearly complete now, a detailed Victorian house with a wraparound porch, a woman standing in the foreground, her back to the viewer, her hand reaching toward the house. Her posture suggests longing or perhaps fear. The brushwork is delicate yet confident, the colors rich and saturated despite the thin layer of dust that has settled over everything in the apartment. According to friends and family, Eliza didn't paint. She wasn't an artist in any traditional sense. She worked as an archivist at the city's historical society, cataloging photographs and documents, preserving the past for future generations. I stepped closer to the canvas, careful not to touch it. There's something familiar about the house, something I can't quite place. I take out my phone and snap several photographs from different angles. The shutters sound unnaturally loud in the quiet apartment. The case file in my hands is still thin, frustratingly so. Eliza Harmon, 34, single, last seen leaving work on a Friday evening. Security footage shows her entering her apartment building at 6:17 p.m. No one saw her leave. Her cell phone, wallet, and keys were found inside her apartment. No signs of forced entry or struggle. No unusual financial transactions. No history of mental health issues or substance abuse. No known enemies. Just a woman who vanished and a painting that shouldn't exist. I spend the next several days immersed in Eliza's life, speaking with her colleagues, her few close friends, her elderly mother who lives in a nursing home across town. I learned that Eliza was quiet but well-liked, dedicated to her work, particularly interested in the history of local architecture. She'd been working on digitizing a collection of photographs and blueprints of historic homes in the area when she disappeared. She was especially fascinated by the old Blackwood estate, her supervisor tells me, sliding a folder across her desk. She requested these materials repeatedly in the weeks before she disappeared. Inside the folder are sepia-toned photographs of a Victorian mansion, remarkably similar to the house in the painting on Eliza's wall. My pulse quickens slightly as I study the images. The Blackwood estate was demolished in the 1960s to make way for an apartment complex, the very building where Eliza lived. That evening I find myself back in Eliza's apartment, standing before the painting again. It seems different somehow, more complete. The woman in the foreground has turned slightly, enough that I can now make out part of her profile. The resemblance to Eliza is undeniable. The soft ticking of my wristwatch fills the silence as I stand there, a strange heaviness settling in my chest. I've worked dozens of missing persons cases, but something about this one feels different, more personal somehow, as if the painting is watching me while I study it. I carefully examine the edges of the canvas, looking for any sign of how this painting could have continued to develop in an empty apartment. There is no dust or smudging that would indicate someone has been here, working on it surreptitiously. The brush strokes appear to have materialized out of nowhere. Over the next week, I dive deeper into the history of the Blackwood estate. Built in 1887 by railroad magnate Edward Blackwood, it was once the crown jewel of the neighborhood. Blackwood lived there with his wife and their 4 children until 1912, when tragedy struck. Historical newspaper articles detail how the youngest daughter, Catherine, disappeared from her bedroom one night. Despite extensive searches, she was never found. The Blackwood family moved away shortly after, unable to bear the constant reminder of their loss. The house passed through several owners before falling into disrepair and eventually being demolished. The parallel between Catherine Blackwood and Eliza Harmon makes my skin prickle with goosebumps. Two women vanished without a trace, connected by the same plot of land, separated by over a century. When I returned to Eliza's apartment a week later, the painting has changed again. The woman is now fully facing forward, and there is no longer any doubt it is Eliza, rendered in perfect detail, standing before the Blackwood house. Her expression is one of serene acceptance, her eyes looking directly at the viewer at me with an intensity that makes me step back involuntarily. And there's something else, something I hadn't noticed before. In the upstairs window of the painted house, barely visible, is the face of a young girl, perhaps 12 or 13 years old. She has a solemn expression, her pale hand pressed against the glass as if longing to be outside. I spend that night researching Catherine Blackwood, finding old photographs in the Historical Society's online archives. The resemblance between the child in the photographs and the face in the window of the painting is unmistakable. 2 days later, I bring in an art expert to examine the painting. He's baffled by the technique, unable to determine what kind of paint was used or how it was applied. It's almost as if the image emerged from within the canvas itself, he tells me, his voice tinged with professional curiosity and underlying unease. That night I dream of the Blackwood house. I'm standing on the porch, my hand raised to knock on the door. Before my knuckles make contact, the door swings open silently. Eliza stands in the doorway, Catherine Blackwood beside her. They both smile at me, but there's something sad in their eyes. "We're waiting for you to understand," Eliza says in my dream. "The house remembers what happened here." I wake up covered in sweat, the dream so vivid I can still hear Eliza's voice echoing in my mind. Without fully understanding why, I drive to Eliza's apartment building before dawn. The security guard recognizes me by now and lets me in without question. In Eliza's apartment, the painting has transformed once more. Now Eliza is standing on the porch of the Blackwood house, the front door open behind her. Catherine stands beside her, their hands clasped together. They both look peaceful, resolved. At the bottom edge of the canvas, nearly imperceptible unless you're looking for it, are the words, "The house remembers, look beneath." My hands tremble slightly as I carefully lift the painting from the wall. There, taped to the back of the canvas, is a small, yellowed envelope. Inside is a faded photograph of the Blackwood family and a newspaper clipping dated 1912 with a headline about Catherine's disappearance. Scrawled on the back of the photograph in what I recognize as Eliza's handwriting are the words, "Edward did it. The house knows. I know now too." The case of Eliza Harmon remains officially unsolved. We found no body, no definitive evidence of what happened to her. The cold historical case of Catherine Blackwood will likely never be closed either. But sometimes late at night, I think about that painting now secured in an evidence locker and the connection between two women separated by time but united by a terrible secret that had waited decades to be acknowledged. I sometimes wonder if the house remembers me too, and if someday my face might appear in that painting, looking out through a window or standing on that wraparound porch, another keeper of secrets that refuse to stay buried beneath foundations built on tragedy. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only witnessed, and sometimes bearing witness is the only justice we can offer. Story 5. I remember the first time I noticed something wasn't right about the Wheaton case. It was early November, and the kind of autumn chill that seeps into your bones had settled over our small town. The case file sat on my desk, illuminated by the amber glow of my desk lamp, the only light in my office as evening descended outside my window. The cottage at 156 Marlowe Lane looked unassuming in the photographs, a simple two-bedroom home with white clapboard siding and navy blue shutters. Nothing about it suggested what was to come. Unusual property dispute, the file had been labeled, but there was something in Detective Garner's eyes when he handed it to me that morning, a hesitation, perhaps, or an unspoken question that told me this was different. I ran my fingers along the edge of the first photograph, feeling the slight texture of the glossy paper. The sound it made was almost imperceptible, like a whisper you're not quite sure you heard. Sarah Wheaton, 34, had purchased the property 6 months prior. Single woman, freelance editor, impeccable credit score, no prior issues with law enforcement, nothing remarkable in her background check. The recorder on my desk hummed softly as I began to dictate my initial notes. Outside, raindrops began to tap against my window, creating a gentle rhythm that would accompany my investigation for weeks to come. Initial interview with Sarah Wheaton. I spoke quietly into the machine. Subject appears lucid, no signs of substance abuse or mental health concerns of note. Sarah had been composed when we first met, her hands folded neatly in her lap as she sat across from me at the station. Her voice was steady, though there was a slight tremor in her fingers as she tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. "I know how this sounds," she had begun, her eyes meeting mine directly. "I've spent weeks telling myself I'm imagining things, that I'm working too hard, or that maybe the previous owners renovated before selling and forgot to mention it." I remember nodding, encouraging her to continue as the old heating system in the precinct clicked and hummed in the background. The cottage was advertised as a simple two-bedroom. That's all I needed, a bedroom for me and one for my home office. But one morning, about 3 weeks after moving in, I found a door at the end of the hallway I swore had never been there before. Here she had paused, her fingers interlacing more tightly. Inside was a child's bedroom, perfectly furnished. Blue walls with cloud patterns, a small wooden bed with airplane sheets, toys arranged neatly on shelves, and on the nightstand a photograph of my family taken years before I was born. I shift in my chair now as I review my notes from that day, the leather creaking softly beneath me. The thermostat on my office wall maintains a steady 70 degrees, but something about this case always leaves me feeling cold. The initial response from my colleagues had been predictable. Old houses settle. Stress and isolation can play tricks on the mind. Perhaps Ms. Wheaton had sleepwalked, or perhaps, as Officer Ramirez had suggested with a smirk, she'd had won too many glasses of wine before bed. But then came the report from the county assessor's office. I remember the weight of that envelope as I opened it, the soft scraping sound of paper sliding against paper. The property at 156 Marlowe Lane had indeed been listed and sold as a two-bedroom home. Every inspection, every document, every record confirmed this. And yet, when Officer Chen and I visited the property that following Wednesday, there were unmistakably 3 bedrooms. "Has it always been like this?" Chen had asked the realtor who met us there, his notebook already in hand. The realtor, Diane Murray, I recall, with her pearl earrings and perpetually surprised eyebrows, had been adamant. "Absolutely not. I've sold 3 properties on this street. This has always been the smallest floor plan in the neighborhood." I remember standing in that 3rd bedroom, feeling the plush carpet beneath my shoes, noticing how the afternoon light filtered through curtains that matched the cloud pattern on the walls perfectly. Everything about the room suggested permanence, as if it had been there for years. The paint showed no signs of being fresh. The window frame had the same slight discoloration from sun exposure as the others in the house. And then there was the photograph that Sarah had mentioned. I picked it up carefully, using the edge of my sleeve to avoid leaving fingerprints. A family of 4 stood in front of what appeared to be the same cottage: father, mother, young boy, and infant. The father had Sarah's distinctive auburn hair and high cheekbones, but according to her, her father had never owned property in this town, and she had never had a brother. When I flipped the photograph over, the inscription in faded blue ink read, "The Wheatons Michael, Elizabeth, James, and baby Sarah, summer 1979. 4 years before Sarah was born to different parents in a different state." The investigation deepened when we ran the names. There had indeed been a Wheaton family living at 156 Marlowe Lane in the late 1970s. Michael and Elizabeth Wheaton had purchased the home in 1976, county records showed. They had a son named James, born in 1974. No record existed of a daughter. The family had moved away in 1980, and the property had changed hands 4 times since then, never staying with one owner for more than 5 years. I returned to my office that evening with a heaviness in my chest that I couldn't explain. The soft yellow light of my desk lamp created shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. I found myself double-checking that my office door remained where it had always been. "Detective," Sarah Wheaton's voice was barely above a whisper when she called the station 2 days later. The slight static on the line couldn't mask the fear in her voice. "There's another one." Officer Chen and I arrived within 20 minutes. The late afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the front lawn of the cottage. Sarah stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself despite the mild temperature. She didn't speak as she led us inside, simply pointed down the hallway where indeed a 4th door now stood. This room was different, an adult's bedroom, with cream-colored walls and a neatly made queen-sized bed. A man's watch sat on the dresser, still ticking. A well-worn copy of The Great Gatsby lay open on the nightstand, a pair of reading glasses folded neatly beside it. "I've never seen any of these things before," Sarah whispered from the doorway, unwilling to step fully into the room. "But look at the closet." Chen moved forward, sliding open the closet door with a pen from his pocket. Inside hung men's clothing: dress shirts, slacks, 2 suits. All would have fit a man approximately 6 feet tall, we estimated. All appeared to be styles from the late 1970s, and embroidered on the breast pocket of one dress shirt, M. Wheaton. The database search that evening revealed what I had begun to suspect. Michael Wheaton had died in 1982, 2 years after the family moved away from Marlowe Lane. Carbon monoxide poisoning in a hotel room while on a business trip. Elizabeth had remarried a year later. James Wheaton, at age 16, had been reported missing in 1990, never found. I stayed late at the office that night, the only sound the gentle whirring of my computer and the occasional passing car outside. The street lamp outside my window flickered occasionally, casting momentary shadows across my desk. Property records from neighboring towns revealed the pattern: the Wheaton family had moved 5 times in 4 years before leaving our county. Each time, their reason for moving was listed as property dispute or structural concerns. A call to Elizabeth Wheaton, now Elizabeth Carson, was met with immediate resistance. "I don't discuss that house," she said, her voice brittle with age and something else I couldn't quite identify. "Not ever, not with anyone. The line went dead before I could ask another question. It was nearly midnight when I found the oldest Record A newspaper clipping from 1979. Local family reports strange occurrence at home. The article was brief, mentioning only that the Wheaton family had reported unexplained additions to their property and that county officials were investigating potential permit violations. No follow-up story ever ran. 3 days later, Sarah Wheaton moved out of the cottage, leaving most of her belongings behind. "I don't want anything that's been in that house," she told me as she signed her statement, her handwriting shaky but determined. The property was put back on the market, a simple 2-bedroom cottage with white clapboard siding and navy blue shutters. I drove by 156 Marlowe Lane yesterday morning, nearly 6 months since the case was officially closed as unexplained property discrepancy, no criminal activity. The cottage looked peaceful in the early spring sunshine, a sold sign swinging gently from the for sale post in the front yard. As I pulled away, I caught a glimpse of the new owners in my rearview mirror, a young couple, arriving with a moving truck. The woman was pregnant, one hand resting protectively on her belly as she gazed up at their new home. I considered turning around, considered telling them what I knew. But what did I know, really? A house that somehow gained rooms that shouldn't exist, rooms that seemed to contain fragments of lives that had never been fully lived. The file sits in our closed cases cabinet now, gathering dust alongside other mysteries that lack neat resolutions. Sometimes, on quiet nights when I'm alone in the precinct, I can almost hear it calling to me like the faint sound of a door opening somewhere down a hallway where no door should be. I've requested a transfer to another department. My new apartment has an open floor plan, no hallways, no unexpected corners, just to be safe. Story 6. The air in the Meridian Grand Hotel always carried a particular scent, a blend of lemon polish, fresh linens, and old wood that had absorbed decades of whispered conversations. I remember the first time I walked through its revolving doors, my footsteps muffled by the thick burgundy carpet that seemed to swallow all sound. Security cameras tracked visitors with subtle precision. Concierges remembered every face. Electronic key cards recorded each entry and exit. The Meridian wasn't just a hotel, it was a sealed ecosystem where nothing went unnoticed. Nothing, that is, except what happened in room 215. My name is Detective Samuel Winters, and after 22 years with the department, I thought I'd seen every variation of deception and mystery. But room 215 taught me otherwise. The case file landed on my desk on a Wednesday morning in November. The sky outside my window was the color of wet cement, and rain tapped gently against the glass like hesitant fingers. The manila folder was thin, unusually thin, for what would become the most perplexing case of my career. 3 incidents in 8 weeks, Lieutenant Hayes said, placing a coffee on my desk. Same room, same pattern. Guest checks in, places belongings in the room, returns later to find everything gone, even their own luggage, as if they'd never checked in at all. I opened the folder, feeling the slight resistance of the paper against my fingertips. 3 witness statements, nearly identical in their confusion and distress. 3 different guests, a business executive from Toronto, a retired teacher from Seattle, and a young tech entrepreneur from Austin, all describing the same impossible scenario. Security footage, I asked, already suspecting the answer. Nothing unusual, no unauthorized entries. The digital locks show no access except from the guests themselves and the housekeeping staff at appropriate times. I drove to the Meridian that afternoon. The hotel stood like a dignified sentinel against the darkening sky, its Art Deco facade catching the last threads of daylight. Inside, the manager, Mr. Lowell, waited for me in the lobby, his posture betraying the tension beneath his polished exterior. "This way, detective," he murmured, guiding me toward an elevator paneled in polished mahogany. "We've kept room 215 vacant since the last incident." The sixth-floor corridor stretched before us, identically numbered doors standing like sentinels on either side. Room 215 was halfway down on the right, indistinguishable from its neighbors except for the slight tension I felt as Mr. Lowell slid the master keycard into the slot. The light flashed green, and the door swung open with a soft sigh. Inside, everything was immaculate, too immaculate. A standard luxury hotel room, king bed with pristine white linens, desk by the window, flat-screen television mounted on the wall, bathroom stocked with artisanal toiletries. Nothing seemed out of place because there was nothing to be out of place. The room held no memory of its previous occupants. I walked the perimeter slowly, my shoes silent on the plush carpet. The closet was empty, its wooden hangers arranged at precise intervals. The safe in the closet was reset, awaiting a new code. The bathroom gleamed under recessed lighting. "Show me the security footage," I said, turning to Mr. Lowell. In the security office, a small room cluttered with monitors, I watched hours of footage condensed into minutes. The hallway outside room 215 remained largely undisturbed. Housekeeping entered once, staying exactly 11 minutes standard for their cleaning protocol. The three guests came and went at different times, their keycard entries registering in the electronic log. No one else entered that room, the security director confirmed, a man named Pearson with tired eyes and a military haircut. "We've reviewed every second of footage. It's impossible." But clearly it wasn't impossible. It had happened 3 times. I interviewed the housekeeping staff next. Maria, who had cleaned room 215 during the periods in question, sat across from me in the staff break room, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "I clean the room normal," she insisted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing strange, nothing different, just regular guest things, suitcase on luggage rack, laptop on desk, clothes hanging in closet. I clean around them, very careful, very professional." I believed her. 26 years at the Meridian, spotless record, respected by management and colleagues alike. That left the guests themselves. I started with the most recent Cameron Wright, the tech entrepreneur who had checked in 3 weeks ago for a 2-night stay. "I had a meeting downtown that ran late," Cameron explained over the phone, his voice still edged with disbelief. "I checked in around 3 p.m., dropped my bags, and went straight to the conference. When I got back around 11 p.m., my keycard still worked, but the room, it was like I'd never been there. My suitcase, my laptop, even my toiletry bag gone. The bed was made perfectly, like no one had touched it." The hotel had compensated Cameron generously upgraded suite, free stay, profuse apologies, but no explanation. No one had an explanation. I returned to room 215 the following day, this time alone. Standing in the center of the room, I closed my eyes and listened. Hotels are never truly silent. There's always the distant hum of elevators, the muffled conversations from adjacent rooms, the subtle vibration of air conditioning systems. But room 215 felt different. It felt attentive somehow, as if the space itself was holding its breath. The desk in the corner drew my attention. It was a beautiful piece, mahogany like much of the hotel's furnishings, with 3 drawers on the right side. I pulled each one open, finding them empty except for the standard hotel stationery and pen in the top drawer. But as I pushed the bottom drawer closed, I noticed a slight resistance, a subtle catch in its movement. Kneeling down, I pulled the drawer all the way out. There, in the back corner of the empty drawer space, was a small brass key. Old and tarnished, nothing like the modern electronic keycards used throughout the hotel. It looked as if it belonged to another era entirely. Mr. Lowell seemed genuinely surprised when I showed him the key. "This doesn't match anything we use," he said, turning it over in his palm. "The Meridian was renovated in 2005. We haven't used physical keys since then." I had the key photographed and logged into evidence before continuing my investigation. The hotel's archives yielded architectural plans from various renovations over the years. Room 215 had once been part of a larger suite, back when the Meridian first opened in 1928. During a renovation in the 1960s, the suite had been divided into two separate rooms, 215 and 217. Room 217 was currently occupied by a long-term guest, an elderly woman named Eleanor Blackwood, who, according to the hotel records, had been staying at the Meridian for nearly 3 months. I arranged to speak with her the following morning. Ms. Blackwood received me in her room, seated by the window with a view of the city spread out below. She was impeccably dressed in a navy blue suit, her silver hair arranged in a neat chignon. Tea had been set out on a small table between us. "So you're investigating the curious incidents in 215, she said, pouring tea into delicate porcelain cups. It wasn't a question. I've been wondering when someone would come asking about that. Something in her tone made me pause. You know something about what's happening. Detective, when you've lived as long as I have, you recognize patterns. She handed me a cup, the china warm against my fingers. I worked for this hotel for 47 years. Started as a switchboard operator in 1965, retired as executive manager in 2012. Now I stay here because, well, where else would I go? This place is more home to me than anywhere else." "And room 215, I prompted gently. Before the renovation in '67, rooms 215 and 217 were a single suite, the Winslow Suite, named after Gregory Winslow, a business associate of the original hotel owner. Mr. Winslow stayed in that suite exclusively whenever he was in town, which was often. He was particular about his belongings, obsessively so." I took a sip of tea, waiting for her to continue. "The story goes that in 1954, a housekeeper moved some of his things while cleaning, just shifted them slightly to dust underneath. When Mr. Winslow returned, he flew into a rage. The housekeeper was dismissed, of course, different times. She gazed out the window momentarily. 2 weeks later, Mr. Winslow died in that suite. Heart attack, they said. He was found clutching his suitcase." "You're suggesting what exactly?" I asked, though I already felt a chill settling at the base of my spine. "I'm not suggesting anything, detective. I'm simply telling you a piece of hotel history that seems relevant to your investigation." She smiled slightly. "Though I will add that after they divided the suite, strange things occasionally happened in 215. Items misplaced, belongings rearranged, small things easily explained away, nothing like what's happening now." I left Ms. Blackwood's room with more questions than answers. Ghost stories weren't evidence, and yet I couldn't dismiss the pattern emerging. 3 incidents, same room, same impossible circumstance. That night I did something unorthodox. I checked into room 215 myself. I brought a single overnight bag, which I deliberately placed on the luggage rack. I hung my jacket in the closet, placed my watch on the nightstand, and arranged my toiletries in the bathroom. Then I left, making sure the door locked behind me. I spent 3 hours in the hotel restaurant and lobby, watching the comings and goings of guests and staff. At precisely 11:30 p.m., I returned to the 6th floor and approached room 215. My keycard worked perfectly. The door swung open. Everything was gone. My bag, my jacket, my toiletries vanished. The bed was pristine, the surfaces empty and polished. The room had reset itself, erasing every trace of my presence. I stood there in the doorway, feeling the weight of impossibility pressing against my senses. Then I remembered the key. I retrieved it from my pocket. I had kept it with me rather than logging it into evidence immediately, a breach of protocol I couldn't quite explain even to myself. It was small and heavy in my palm, the brass warm from being carried close to my body. There was no obvious keyhole in room 215, no antique lock that might correspond to this outdated key. But as I moved around the room, the key seemed to grow warmer in my hand. When I approached the wall that once connected rooms 215 and 217, the key was almost hot enough to burn. I pressed my hand against the wallpaper, feeling for irregularities. Near the floor, partially hidden by the edge of the desk, my fingers detected a slight indentation. Kneeling down, I examined the area more closely and found a small, nearly invisible keyhole. The brass key slid in perfectly. When I turned it, I heard a soft click from inside the wall. A panel beside the keyhole shifted slightly. I pried it open with my fingers to reveal a small cavity in the wall. Inside was a leather suitcase, its surface cracked with age. With gloved hands, I carefully removed it and placed it on the bed. The latches were tarnished but still functional. When I opened the case, I found it meticulously packed with men's clothing and personal items, all dating from the mid-20th century. A monogrammed pocket watch, a fountain pen, several notebooks filled with precise handwriting in fading ink. And photographs, dozens of them, each showing the same stern-faced man in various hotel rooms around the world. In each photo, his belongings were arranged in exactly the same manner: suitcase on a luggage rack to the left of the closet, shaving kit centered precisely on the bathroom counter, pocket watch on the nightstand at a perfect 45-degree angle to the bed. Gregory Winslow, I presumed. The final item in the suitcase was a hotel ledger, the kind used decades ago to record guest information. One page was marked with a thin red ribbon. The entry showed Winslow's last check-in date, October 17, 1954. In the margin, written in different handwriting, was a single sentence: "Guest departed permanently, October 29, 1954. The room felt suddenly colder. I closed the suitcase and replaced it in the wall cavity, turning the key to lock it away again. Some secrets, I decided, belonged to the past. The Meridian's management was reluctant to acknowledge my findings. The case was officially closed as unexplained property removal, with compensation paid to the affected guests. Room 215 was converted to a storage space no longer available for guest use. I keep the brass key in my desk drawer now. Sometimes, late at night when the office is empty and quiet, I take it out and feel its weight in my palm. I wonder about the man who couldn't bear to have his belongings disturbed, whose need for order was so powerful that it somehow reached beyond death itself. And I wonder about the new guests at the Meridian who occasionally report that their items have been subtly rearranged during their stay. A suitcase moved slightly to the left, a watch turned to a precise angle on the nightstand. The Meridian Grand Hotel still stands, elegant and imposing against the city skyline. It still prides itself on impeccable service and flawless security, but I never stay there when I travel. Some guests, it seems, never truly check out. Story 7, it was sealed with black wax, delivered directly to her door. The letter described her most private thoughts, fears, and regrets, things she had never spoken out loud, and at the bottom, a single line, "You can't hide from me." I remember the first time I saw that letter. It was laid carefully on my desk by Detective Morrow, her fingers lingering on the evidence bag as if hesitant to let it go. The office hummed with the gentle drone of the air conditioning, a sound so constant that it had become invisible until moments of deep concentration made it perceptible again. Outside, Seattle's perpetual drizzle painted the windows with delicate streaks, distorting the view of the gray city beyond. "This came 3 days before she disappeared," Morrow said, her voice low and measured. The fluorescent lights above us buzzed faintly, casting shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Carolyn Reed, 34, literary editor, lived alone in an apartment in Ballard. Nobody reported her missing until her sister couldn't reach her for their weekly call. I carefully slid the letter from its protective sleeve, the paper whispering against the plastic. The black wax seal had been broken, but the impression was still visible in intricate design that resembled a key within a circle. The handwriting inside was immaculate, almost mechanical in its precision, written with a fine-tipped blue pen that had occasionally pressed hard enough to leave slight indentations on the reverse side. "The letter knew her secrets," Morrow continued, settling into the chair across from me. The wood creaked softly under her weight. Details about her childhood in Portland, the abortion she had in college that even her sister didn't know about, her habit of watching her neighbors through binoculars, something she'd never admitted to anyone. I let my fingers trace the edge of the paper, feeling the quality of it expensive, heavy stock with a subtle texture, not something you'd find at an office supply store. My skin registered the slight coolness of the material, a physical connection to an object that had passed through the hands of someone who knew too much. "And no fingerprints," I stated, already knowing the answer. "None but hers, no DNA either, no camera footage of delivery, it just appeared." The case file lay open between us, a thin collection of documents that felt inadequate to the weight of a missing person. I could smell the faint scent of coffee from Morrow's mug, mixed with the clean synthetic odor of the laminated pages. As I leafed through the preliminary report, each page turned with a crisp sound that seemed to punctuate the silence. Carolyn Reed lived a quiet life. Her apartment was found undisturbed, dishes washed and put away, bed made, plants watered. Her laptop sat closed on her desk, password protected. Her phone was missing, presumed to be with her. Credit cards unused since the day before she disappeared. Car still in its designated spot in the underground garage. "What else came before this?" I asked, still studying the letter. Was there escalation, phone calls, emails, social media contact? Morrow shook her head, a strand of gray-streaked hair falling across her face. "Nothing we can find. This letter was the only contact we know of, but someone had been watching her, collecting information. For how long, we don't know." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the familiar tension building at the base of my skull. The weight of a new case always settled their first physical manifestation of responsibility. In the corridor outside, footsteps passed by, unhurried and steady. Someone laughed briefly, the sound quickly fading. "Have you searched her digital footprint?" I asked, already knowing the department's limitations when it came to tech expertise. Superficially, her browser history showed nothing unusual. Social media accounts appeared normal. We've requested access to her email accounts, but the providers are being their usual cooperative selves. The sarcasm in Morrow's voice was subtle but unmistakable. I want to see her apartment, I said, carefully returning the letter to its evidence bag. The drive to Ballard took 20 minutes, the windshield wipers creating a hypnotic rhythm against the persistent rain. Morrow drove in silence, occasionally glancing at her phone when it buzzed with notifications. The heater hummed, creating a bubble of warmth that contrasted with the gray chill outside. As we traveled, I watched the city scroll past pedestrians hunched under umbrellas, shop windows glowing with welcoming light, traffic signals reflecting in puddles on the asphalt. Carolyn's apartment building was modern but unremarkable, 6 floors of concrete and glass, with small balconies that faced the street. The property manager met us in the lobby, keys jingling nervously in his hand. He was young, maybe mid-20s, and clearly uncomfortable with the police presence that had disrupted his routine over the past days. "Has anyone else asked about Ms. Reed?" I questioned as we rode the elevator to the 4th floor. The small space filled with the subtle scent of the manager's cologne, something woodsy and too strong. "No, just you guys," he replied, shifting his weight from one foot to another. She was quiet, paid rent on time. I barely noticed her, honestly. The apartment was still sealed with police tape, which Morrow carefully removed before unlocking the door. As it swung open, I was struck by the stillness inside, the particular quality of emptiness that feels temporary, as if the occupant had just stepped out and would return at any moment. The space was meticulously organized. Bookshelves lined one wall, volumes arranged by color rather than author or title. The furniture was minimal but of good quality, a gray sectional sofa, a glass coffee table, a desk positioned near the window with a view of the street below. In the kitchen, a single mug sat upside down on a dish rack. A small pot of herbs, basil and mint, sat on the windowsill, still alive but beginning to wilt slightly. I moved through the rooms slowly, absorbing details. In the bathroom, a toothbrush stood in a holder, bristles still damp. The shower contained expensive shampoo and conditioner, half used. The bedroom revealed a woman who valued order, clothes hung by type and color, shoes aligned precisely at the bottom of the closet. On the nightstand, a novel lay open and face down, a bookmark placed about halfway through. "She didn't plan to go," I murmured, more to myself than to Morrow, who was examining the contents of a desk drawer. "No," she agreed. "Everything suggests she expected to come back." I approached the windows, drawing back the sheer curtains to look at the view. Across the street stood another apartment building, its windows dark rectangles mirroring our own. I thought about Carolyn watching her neighbors through binoculars and wondered if someone had been watching her in return. As I turned away, something caught my eye, a small tear in the curtain fabric, almost invisible unless you were looking for irregularities. I examined it closer, finding that it wasn't a tear but a tiny hole, as if made by something sharp and precise. "Detective," I called, not touching the curtain. "We need to check for surveillance devices." The sweep took hours, conducted by technicians with specialized equipment. They found 3 listening devices, one behind a light switch plate, one underneath the coffee table, and one in the bedroom, embedded in the curtain rod. Small, sophisticated, and commercially available to anyone with the knowledge to use them. They'd been active for at least 2 months, according to the battery life. "She was being monitored," Morrow stated as we watched the techs bag the devices. The room felt different now, contaminated by the knowledge that private moments had been observed, collected, analyzed. The letter writer knew her schedule, her habits, I said, knew when she'd be home to receive the letter and when she'd be alone to read it. Back at the precinct, we started building the profile. Someone methodical, patient, someone with technical knowledge, someone who could blend in, who wouldn't attract attention when entering the building or lingering nearby. Someone who derived power from knowledge, from the intimate details of another person's life. The sister arrived the next day, flying in from Chicago. Jessica Reed was 2 years younger than Carolyn, but looked older, her face lined with worry that had aged her prematurely. She sat across from us in the interview room, clutching a paper cup of station coffee that she hadn't tasted. "I don't understand," she kept saying, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who would want to hurt Caro? She doesn't have enemies." "Did she ever mention being watched?" I asked gently. Anyone making her uncomfortable, following her, showing unusual interest. Jessica shook her head, then paused, her brow furrowing. There was, about 3 months ago, she mentioned a new client. She freelances as an editor, you know. This client was demanding, wanted multiple revisions, called at odd hours. She was thinking of dropping them. "Do you have a name?" "No," she didn't say. Client confidentiality, she always took that seriously. But I remember she said something strange, that this person seemed to know what she was going to suggest before she suggested it, like they could read her mind. The words sent a chill through the room. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving behind a strange, expectant silence. We obtained a warrant for Carolyn's email and phone records. The data took days to arrive, during which time the case hung suspended in a limbo of waiting. I spent hours reviewing what we knew, feeling the shape of the absence around which we were working. Someone had watched Carolyn Reed, listened to her, learned her. And then, after sending a letter to prove their power over her, they had taken her. When the records finally arrived, the pattern emerged quickly. A client using the name E. Blackwood had contacted Carolyn 4 months earlier, requesting editing services for what was described as a personal memoir. The correspondence started professionally, but became increasingly personal. E. Blackwood asked questions that went beyond the scope of their working relationship about Carolyn's childhood, her beliefs, her regrets. Looking at the email chain, I could see how skillfully it had been done, how the questions were woven into discussions about the manuscript in ways that wouldn't immediately raise alarms. "He was interviewing her," Morrow said as we reviewed the emails together, getting her to provide the very information he would later use against her. "And she couldn't see it," I added, because it was disguised as interest in her professional opinion. The emails from E. Blackwood were sent from an account created specifically for communicating with Carolyn. The IP addresses led to public libraries and coffee shops throughout Seattle, never the same location twice. The phone number provided went to a burner phone, purchased with cash. The manuscript itself was nowhere to be found in Carolyn's cloud storage or computer. "He was careful," I said, "but people this methodical, this controlling, they keep trophies, records. They need to revisit their work to savor it." On day 7 of Carolyn's disappearance, we got our first real lead. A credit card belonging to E. Blackwood, a card that had been used to make an initial payment to Carolyn, was used at a gas station in Tacoma. The surveillance footage showed a man in his 40s, average height and build, wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He drove a dark sedan with plates that, when checked, belonged to a rental car. The rental had been made under the name Edward Blake, with a driver's license that, when investigated, proved to be expertly forged. but now we had a face, even if partially obscured, and we had a direction south. 3 more transactions followed over the next 24 hours, creating a trail that led toward Portland, Carolyn's childhood home, the place where, according to the letter, she had secrets buried. I remember the moment when everything connected. Sitting in the incident room, surrounded by photos and timelines, I reached for Carolyn's college records, the ones that confirmed the abortion mentioned in the letter. The doctor who performed the procedure, I said to Morrow, who was reviewing the gas station footage for the 3rd time. What was his name? She shuffled through papers, finding the report. Elliot Blackburn, why? E. Blackwood, Edward Blake, Elliot Blackburn. He's using variations of the same initials, I said, the realization sending adrenaline through my system. And he's connected to her past. Check if he still practices. He didn't. Dr. Elliot Blackburn had lost his medical license 8 years earlier for ethical violations involving patient privacy. He had been accused of developing inappropriate relationships with vulnerable patients, of using information gained during consultations for personal purposes. He had disappeared after a lawsuit, leaving behind debts and a reputation in ruins. And now he had resurfaced, fixated on a patient from 15 years ago. A patient whose personal information he had kept, whose life he had tracked, whose privacy he had systematically violated. The arrest took place in a small rental cabin outside Portland. Blackburn didn't resist. Inside, officers found walls covered with information about Carolyn, photos, notes, transcripts of conversations recorded through the listening devices. On a desk sat a typewriter with the same font used in the letter and a stick of black wax with the key insignia. But they didn't find Carolyn. Blackburn sat across from me in the interrogation room, his hands folded neatly on the table. He looked ordinary, graying hair cut short, wire-rimmed glasses, button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows. The kind of man you would pass on the street without a second glance. "You won't find her," he said before I could ask a single question. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "She's hidden herself away." "What does that mean?" I leaned forward, keeping my own voice calm despite the urgency pulsing through me. His smile was slight but unmistakable. The letter wasn't a threat, it was a warning. I wasn't the only one watching her. For hours he spoke in riddles and half-truths, seemingly enjoying the confusion he created. He admitted to sending the letter, to placing the devices, to collecting information. But he insisted that he had never harmed Carolyn, that his interest in her was academic rather than malicious. "I study people," he explained, "their secrets, their habits, the patterns they don't even recognize in themselves. Carolyn was especially interesting, so controlled, so careful. I wanted to see what would happen if that control was threatened. By telling her she was being watched. By letting her know she was seen, truly seen." His eyes, pale blue behind the glasses, held mine. "Do you know what most people fear more than death? Being truly known, having no place to hide." It was on the 10th day that Jessica Reed called, her voice shaking with emotion. "I got a postcard," she said, "from Carolyn." The postcard showed Mount Rainier against a blue sky. On the back, in Carolyn's handwriting, was a simple message. "I'm safe. I needed to disappear for a while. Don't look for me." It was postmarked from a small town in eastern Washington, a place with no connection to Carolyn's known history. When local police checked, they found that a woman matching her description had stayed at a motel there for one night before moving on. She had paid cash and used a different name. "She's running," Morrow said as we added the postcard to our evidence board. "But from what? From Blackburn." "Or from whatever he warned her about," I replied, studying the handwriting for any signs of duress. "He said he wasn't the only one watching her." The case remained open, Blackburn charged with stalking and illegal surveillance. But Carolyn Reed had vanished of her own accord, slipping away into a new identity, leaving behind a life that had been observed, recorded, invaded. She had taken the ultimate step to reclaim her privacy. She had disappeared. Sometimes I wonder where she is now, if she found a place to hide, to rebuild, if she still looks over her shoulder, still checks for cameras, still keeps her secrets close, if she ever found freedom from the weight of being watched. And sometimes, in the dark hours of night when sleep evades me, I wonder what was in Blackburn's manuscript, the personal memoir that drew Carolyn into his web. What secrets of his own had he shared with her? What had she learned about him that might have made her a threat? The letter knew her secrets, but perhaps she knew his as well. The case file remains open, a thin folder in a drawer of unsolved mysteries. And somewhere Carolyn Reed exists under a different name, in a different place, carefully guarding her privacy, living with the knowledge that once, for a time, every moment of her life had been observed by unseen eyes, that her most private thoughts had been exposed, examined, collected. That someone had seen her, truly seen her, and found a way to let her know, "You can't hide from me." Story 8, I still remember the first time I noticed it, that peculiar reflection in the window of the Mercer estate. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the polished oak floors, and dust motes danced lazily in the golden beams that sliced through the Victorian windows. It was my third week investigating the disappearance of Eliza Mercer, and the house had become as familiar to me as my own weathered hands, or so I thought. The house stood proudly at the end of Oakridge Lane, 3 stories of red brick and intricate woodwork that spoke of old money and carefully preserved history. I'd walked its corridors countless times, documenting each room, each closet, each hidden corner where secrets might hide. Yet somehow on that particular Tuesday in October, as the maple leaves outside burned crimson against a steel-gray sky, I saw something I'd never noticed before. I was standing in the main hallway, reviewing my notes, when a shifting light caught my attention. One of the tall windows that lined the east wall of the house reflected a room I didn't recognize, a small space with faded floral wallpaper and a single wooden chair positioned facing outward, as if waiting for someone to sit. But when I turned to look behind me, there was only the solid wall of the main staircase. No door, no room, nothing that could create such a reflection. "Must be the angle," I murmured to myself, the sound of my voice strangely muffled in the empty house. I moved closer to the window, my leather shoes whispering against the hardwood. The reflection remained impossibly clear, the chair, the wallpaper, and now something else. A small writing desk with what appeared to be a leather-bound journal resting on its surface. The Mercer case had been troubling from the beginning. Eliza, 28 years old, successful art dealer, had vanished from this house 6 weeks earlier. No signs of struggle, no evidence of forced entry. Her car remained in the garage, her phone on her nightstand. It was as if she had simply dissolved into the air between her bedroom and the kitchen, where a half-finished cup of tea had been found cold on the counter. The detective assigned to me, young, fresh-faced, and eager despite the perpetual circles under his eyes, had been thorough, interviewing neighbors, colleagues, Eliza's ex-husband. But we'd found nothing substantial, only whispers and theories that led nowhere, until now, perhaps. I adjusted my glasses and leaned closer to the window. The reflection showed more details of the mysterious room, crown molding along the ceiling, a a small brass lamp on the desk, and something else that made my breath catch. In the reflection of the room that didn't exist, I could now see a woman sitting in the wooden chair, her back to me, dark hair falling in waves past her shoulders, the exact shade of Eliza's hair in the photographs that decorated the mantelpiece downstairs. "Detective Harmon," Young's voice floated up from the first floor, breaking my concentration. When I looked back at the window, the reflection showed only what it should: the opposite wall of the hallway, the framed landscape painting, the small table with its arrangement of dried flowers. I didn't mention what I'd seen to Young. After 27 years in law enforcement, I'd learned to trust my instincts but verify before sharing, especially something as improbable as this. Instead, I asked him to pull the original blueprints of the house, citing a theory about hidden spaces between walls. That night in my small apartment across town, I dreamed of the room. In my dream, the woman turned slightly, just enough for me to glimpse her profile. Just enough to confirm what I already suspected. It was Eliza Mercer, somehow trapped in a room that didn't exist in the physical architecture of her own home. The blueprints arrived the next morning. Young spread them across the dining room table of the Mercer house, his fingers tracing the lines of rooms and corridors as I looked on. Nothing unusual presented itself, no hidden spaces, no sealed rooms, nothing that corresponded to what I'd seen in the window's reflection. "What exactly are we looking for, sir?" Young asked, his eyes darting to my face and then back to the blueprints. "Inconsistencies," I answered vaguely. "Sometimes houses like these have spaces that get walled off during renovations. Previous owners might have sealed up areas for any number of reasons." Young nodded, satisfied with my explanation. We spent the morning measuring dimensions, comparing the actual house to its paper representation. Everything matched perfectly. I returned to the window around the same time as the previous day, positioning myself exactly where I'd been standing. At first, the reflection showed nothing unusual. Then, as if responding to my patience, it shifted, the room appearing again, more detailed than before. The floral wallpaper had a pattern of small blue roses on a cream background. The wooden chair was oak with a worn velvet cushion. And Eliza was there again, still seated with her back to me, but now I could see she was writing in the journal on the desk. I placed my hand against the cool glass of the window, and for a brief moment I swore I felt it give slightly, like the surface of water about to part. Then Eliza's head turned, just enough that I could see her mouth move, forming words I couldn't hear. Reading her lips, it looked like she said, "Find it." For the next week, I became obsessed with the window and its impossible reflection. I researched the history of the house, discovering that it had been built in 1897 by William Mercer, Eliza's great-great-grandfather, a man rumored to have had interests in the occult. Local legends spoke of strange gatherings at the house in the early 1900s, of experiments with dimensions and spaces beyond normal perception. I found an old photograph in the Town Historical Society archives, William Mercer standing with a group of stern-faced men in front of the house. In one of the windows, a strange distortion was visible, like a ripple in the glass. The archivist who helped me locate the photograph mentioned casually that William's daughter had disappeared from the house in 1912, never to be found. Each day at the same time, I returned to the window. Each day, the reflection grew clearer, more substantial. Eliza continued writing in her journal, occasionally looking up as if sensing my presence. On the 7th day, she turned fully in her chair, facing me directly for the first time. Her face was pale but composed, her dark eyes intense as she held up the journal, open to a page filled with writing. I couldn't read it clearly, but I could make out a date at the top of the page, October 17, 1912. The day William Mercer's daughter had vanished over a century ago. That evening I convinced Young to leave early, claiming I wanted to review some notes alone. Once he was gone, I returned to the window, waiting as the sun set and the house grew darker around me. When the reflection appeared this time, Eliza stood directly in front of it, her hand pressed against her side of the glass, mirroring mine. Her lips moved again, the journal in the wall. I spent hours tapping the walls near the window, listening for hollow spaces. Near midnight, my knuckles raw and my patience wearing thin, I heard it, a different sound, slightly resonant, in a section of the wall about 3 feet from the window. Using a pocket knife, I carefully pried at the edge of a wooden panel until it gave way, revealing a small compartment. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age but perfectly preserved. The handwriting inside matched the sample of Eliza's writing we had on file, but interspersed with these modern entries were older ones, dating back to 1912, written in a different hand. As I read through the journal, a chill settled deep in my bones. William Mercer had indeed been experimenting with something he called reflective dimensions, spaces that existed parallel to our own, visible only through specific focal points like windows or mirrors. His daughter Emily had accidentally slipped into one such dimension while assisting him, and somehow over a century later, Eliza had done the same. The journal contained detailed notes about the phenomenon, written by both Emily and Eliza across time. They had found each other in this strange parallel space, this room that existed outside normal dimensions, and they had discovered that on certain days, when the light hit the window just right, they could communicate with our world. The final entry, written in Eliza's hand, contained instructions for a ritual that might reverse the process, a specific arrangement of mirrors, a recitation in Latin to be performed when the moon was in the same phase as it had been on the day she disappeared. I didn't tell Young about my discovery. Some truths are too strange, too fragile for official reports. Instead, I waited for the right moon phase and performed the ritual exactly as described. The window shimmered like water, the reflection of the room grew impossibly bright, and then nothing. The light faded, the reflection returned to normal, and I was left alone in the hallway, the journal clutched in my hands. 3 days later, Eliza Mercer was found wandering in Oak Ridge Park, disoriented but unharmed. She had no memory of where she had been for the past 2 months, no explanation for her disappearance or return. The case was closed, filed away as one of those inexplicable incidents that occasionally punctuate a career in law enforcement. I kept the journal, though, and sometimes when the light is just right and I'm standing at just the right angle, I catch glimpses in my own windows of a room with faded floral wallpaper, a wooden chair, and 2 women with dark hair looking back at me with knowing eyes. They're waiting, I think, for someone else to notice the rooms that watch us from the other side of reflections, waiting for someone else to slip through. I've started avoiding mirrors. Story 9, I still remember the weight of the case file in my hands that December morning. Outside, snow fell silently against the precinct windows, creating a hushed atmosphere that matched the peculiar case I'd been assigned. The manila folder wasn't particularly thick, but something about it felt heavy, substantial, in a way I couldn't quite explain. As I opened it, the paper rustled softly under my fingertips, the sound amplified in the quiet of my office. The complaint seemed straightforward enough, a landlord reporting strange occurrences in what should have been a vacant apartment. But there was something in the details that made me pause, made me read each line twice before setting the file down on my weathered desk. The apartment has been officially vacant for 3 years, Alina Winters, the building owner, had stated in her initial report. Her voice on the recorded statement was calm but carried an undercurrent of unease. But when I brought in the new tenant last week, we found evidence of occupation. I sipped my coffee, black, no sugar, letting the bitter warmth spread through me as I listened to the recording again. The soft hiss of the tape player provided a gentle backdrop to Alina's voice. There were clothes in the closet, she continued. Men's clothes, neatly pressed and hung, and in the kitchen, a meal had been prepared, not leftovers, detective. A fresh meal, still warm when we entered. I closed my eyes, visualizing the scene. A modest one-bedroom on Maple Street, third floor of a pre-war building. Hardwood floors that creaked slightly when walked upon. Windows that faced east, catching the morning light. And inside, signs of life where there should be none. The strangest part, Alina's voice lowered almost to a whisper, were the messages, carved into the walls, not graffiti, not written in marker or paint, actual carvings deep into the plaster. They all said the same thing: you shouldn't be here. The building was over 100 years old, one of the first apartment complexes built in our small city. It had changed hands multiple times, survived economic downturns, renovations, and the slow transformation of the neighborhood around it. Alina had inherited it from her father 5 years ago and had been managing it meticulously ever since. The next morning I drove to the property. The snow had stopped, leaving everything covered in a pristine white blanket that muffled sound and softened edges. The building stood tall against the pale winter sky, its red brick facade darkened with age and weather. Alina met me in the lobby, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She was perhaps in her early 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her posture was rigid, hands clasped tightly before her. "Thank you for coming, detective," she said, leading me toward the elevator. Apartment 3B has been vacant since Mr. Collins moved out in 2019. We've shown it a few times, but never found the right tenant, until Ms. Reynolds came along last week. The elevator hummed softly as it carried us upward, the mechanism inside working with a rhythm that reminded me of a heartbeat. "And where is Ms. Reynolds now?" I asked. "Hotel," Alina replied shortly. "She refused to stay after what we found. Can't say I blame her." We reached the third floor, and I followed Alina down a narrow hallway carpeted in deep burgundy. The air felt still and slightly cool, carrying the faint scent of old wood and something else, something I couldn't quite identify. She stopped before apartment 3B, produced a key, and hesitated just a moment before unlocking the door. It swung open with a subtle creak. My first impression was of normalcy, a modest apartment, well-maintained, with sunlight streaming through east-facing windows. A small living room opened into a kitchenette, with a hallway presumably leading to the bedroom and bathroom. "The clothes were here," Alina said, walking to the closet near the entrance and opening it. It was empty now, the wooden hangers swaying slightly from the disturbance. Men's clothes, 5 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, all clean, all pressed. I nodded, making a note, and the meal. She gestured toward the kitchen counter. Right there, a plate with roast beef, potatoes, vegetables, steam still rising from it, as if someone had just served it and stepped away for a moment. I moved through the space slowly, absorbing details. Nothing seemed out of place now. The counters were clean, the sink empty, no dishes in the drying rack. "The messages," I said, looking around at the seemingly unmarked walls. Aliner's face tightened. In the bedroom, I covered them with paint yesterday. Ms. Reynolds insisted before she left, said she couldn't bear looking at them anymore. The bedroom was small but comfortable, with a window that looked out over the quiet street below. The walls were a fresh cream color, the paint job recent and somewhat hastily done. In some areas I could see faint impressions beneath the new layer, like scars that hadn't fully healed. "Do you have photos before you painted?" Alina nodded and handed me her phone. I took these when Ms. Reynolds called me in. The images showed deep grooves in the wall, clearly made with something sharp and substantial. The letters were uneven but legible, carved with what appeared to be significant force. "You shouldn't be here," repeated on 3 of the 4 walls, the message growing larger and more frantic-looking as it progressed around the room. "Has anyone else had access to this apartment?" I asked, handing back the phone. "Only me and the maintenance man, Frank. He's been with the building for 20 years, loyal as they come." "I'd like to speak with him." Alina nodded. "Of course, he's working downstairs today." Before leaving the bedroom, I ran my fingers lightly over one of the walls, feeling the subtle ridges beneath the paint. Something about those carved words bothered me, not just their content, but the desperation they seemed to convey. Frank Denton was a tall, lean man in his 60s with calloused hands and eyes that seemed to catch everything. We sat in the building's maintenance office, a small room filled with tools and the scent of WD-40. 3 years that apartment's been empty," he confirmed, echoing Eleanor's statement. "I check it weekly, clean it monthly, never seen a sign of anyone living there. No signs of forced entry, no disturbances." Frank shook his head slowly. "None. That's what makes it so strange. The building's secure. You need a key to get in the front door and the apartment locks are solid. No one's breaking in without leaving marks." I leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about the previous tenant, Mr. Collins, was it?" Something flickered across Frank's face, so brief I almost missed it. "James Collins," he said, "quiet man, lived alone, kept to himself, paid his rent on time until he didn't." "What happened to him?" Frank's eyes drifted toward the window where the winter sun was beginning to sink lower in the sky. "Don't rightly know. One day he was here, the next he wasn't. Left everything behind, clothes, furniture, personal items. Ms. Winters had it all cleared out eventually." "Did he leave a forwarding address, emergency contact?" "None that I know of. Ms. Winters might have more information." I made another note, then asked, "Did you notice anything unusual about apartment 3B before these recent events? Cold spots, strange noises, anything out of the ordinary?" Frank's expression remained neutral, but I caught a subtle tensing of his shoulders. "Buildings this old make all kinds of noises, detective. Pipes knock, floors creak, nothing out of the ordinary." I decided to push a little harder. Those messages carved into the walls that would take time make noise. Hard to believe no one heard anything. Frank's gaze met mine directly. "Most tenants work during the day. Building's pretty quiet then. As for me, I can't be everywhere at once." I nodded, acknowledging the point. "Just one more thing, Mr. Denton. The meal that was found on the counter, roast beef, was it? Does that mean anything to you?" His eyes widened almost imperceptibly before he controlled his expression. "No, detective, should it?" I left my card with both Alina and Frank, instructing them to call if anything else unusual occurred. Back at the precinct, I ran a background check on James Collins, the previous tenant of apartment 3B. The search returned basic information. 48 years old at the time of his tenancy, worked as an accountant at a small local firm, no criminal record. No death certificate on file, but also no activity on his social security number for the past 3 years. It was as if he had simply disappeared. I dug deeper, contacting his former employer. They confirmed that James Collins had stopped showing up for work 3 years ago. No notice given, no contact since. His final paycheck had never been collected. As night fell outside my office window, I found myself staring at the one photograph I'd been able to locate of James Collins, a grainy image from his employee file. An unremarkable man with thinning hair and glasses, the kind of person you might pass on the street without noticing. The next day I returned to the apartment building with a forensic team. We examined apartment 3B thoroughly, lifting fingerprints, taking samples, looking for any evidence of recent occupation. The results were puzzling. The only prints found belonged to Elena, Frank, and presumably Ms. Reynolds. No traces of food residue on the counter where the meal had allegedly been. No fibers from the men's clothing in the closet. And yet, when we removed a section of the painted-over drywall, the carvings were undeniable. Deep, forceful marks that would have required significant time and effort to create. 1 week into the investigation, I received a call from Elena Winters. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the fear beneath her composure. "It's happening again," she said simply. "Another meal on the counter, more clothes in the closet." I arrived within the hour. The apartment was as still and quiet as before, sunlight streaming through the windows creating pools of light on the hardwood floor. And there, on the kitchen counter, sat a plate of roast beef, potatoes, and vegetables. Steam rose gently from the food, as if it had just been served. The closet contained 5 men's shirts and 2 pairs of pants, all clean and pressed. "This is exactly what we found before," Elena whispered, standing in the doorway as if afraid to enter fully. I approached the meal carefully, noting its presentation. A Sunday dinner, the kind served in countless homes across America. I photographed it from multiple angles before examining the food more closely. It was then that I noticed something, a small detail that sent a chill through me despite the sunlight warming the room. At the edge of the plate, partially hidden by a roasted potato, was a sliver of paper. I carefully extracted it with gloved fingers. It was a receipt from a local grocery store, dated 3 years earlier, the day before James Collins had disappeared. The detective called one of the officers from the bedroom. "You should see this." The freshly painted walls now bore new messages, carved deeply into the plaster with the same desperate intensity as before. But this time, the message had changed. "I never left." We expanded our investigation, interviewing other tenants in the building. Most had never met James Collins, but a few of the long-term residents remembered him vaguely. "Quiet man," said Mrs. Abernathy from 2A, echoing Frank's description. "Always nodded hello, but never stopped to chat. Kept odd hours toward the end." "Odd how?" I asked. "Coming and going at strange times, middle of the night sometimes, and I'd hear him pacing, up and down for hours." Another tenant, Mr. Ramirez from 4C, provided a different perspective. He changed in those last few months, lost weight, looked scared maybe. I asked him once if everything was okay. He just said he was having trouble sleeping. It was during my third interview with Frank Denton that the case began to shift direction. We sat again in his maintenance office, the late afternoon light casting long shadows across the floor. "Tell me about the building's renovation 5 years ago," I said, watching his reaction carefully. Frank's eyes narrowed slightly. Standard stuff, updated some wiring, fixed structural issues, nothing special. "And apartment 3B, any specific work done there?" A pause, just a fraction too long, same as the others. I placed a folder on the table between us, opening it to reveal documents I'd obtained from the city's building department. That's interesting because according to these records, apartment 3B required extensive reconstruction, something about a wall that wasn't on the original blueprints. Frank's posture changed subtly, a new tension evident in his shoulders. Old buildings have quirks. Sometimes the original plans don't match what's actually there. And James Collins, did he have concerns about the renovations? Frank's gaze dropped to his hands. He had questions. About. A long silence stretched between us. Finally, Frank sighed, a sound of defeat and perhaps relief. "About the noises," he said quietly. He said he could hear scratching inside the walls, tapping. Sometimes he thought he heard whispers. 3 days later, with a warrant in hand, we began removing sections of the wall in apartment 3B's bedroom, the wall that wasn't on the original blueprints. Behind the drywall, we found older material, lath and plaster consistent with the building's original construction, and behind that, a space narrow, barely wide enough for a person, and inside that space we found the remains of James Collins. The medical examiner later determined he had been dead for approximately 3 years. Cause of death, asphyxiation. His fingertips were worn to the bone, the walls around him marked with desperate scratches, and in places where he could reach, carved messages. "I never left." Frank Denton confessed 2 days later. During the renovations, he and Collins had argued over noise complaints. The confrontation had turned physical, ending with Collins unconscious. Panicking, Frank had hidden him in the wall space before sealing it up, telling everyone that Collins had simply moved away without notice. What he couldn't explain, what none of us could explain, were the meals that appeared on the counter, always roast beef. The clothes hanging in the closet. The fact that the carved messages continued to appear even after Collins' remains had been removed from the building. Alina Winters sold the building 6 months later. Apartment 3B remains vacant to this day. Sometimes, maintenance workers report hearing scratching sounds from inside the walls. Sometimes, they say, if you stand very still in the empty bedroom, you can hear a whisper. "You shouldn't be here." I keep the case file in my desk drawer, the weight of it still somehow greater than its physical presence should allow. On quiet nights in the office, when the snow falls against the windows and the building grows still, I sometimes think I understand why. Some tenants never leave. Story 10. The parcel arrived unannounced, shrouded in mystery. No return address, no traceable markings, just a damp cardboard box tainted by the morning dew. It wasn't intended for her, the name on it a stranger's, but the address was hers. She hesitated, the rational voice urging her to disregard it, to leave it untouched on the porch. Yet curiosity beckoned, and she succumbed. The tape sealing the box was peeled away, revealing not mundane contents as expected, but a VHS tape and a solitary note bearing a simple directive: watch alone. Sarah Miller held the black plastic cassette in her hands, its weight unsettling, as if burdened with secrets untold. Her fingers lingered on its worn edges, tracing the imperfections etched into the plastic casing. The note, bearing the urgent scribbles of an unknown hand, hinted at a tale waiting to unfold. Amidst the familiar sounds of suburban life outside her home, distant barks of a dog, laughter of playing children, the persistent drone of a lawnmower, Sarah brought the enigmatic package inside, placing it on her kitchen counter. Doubt crept in, mingling with unease as she pondered the unfamiliar name Daniel Whitaker. A name that held no significance in her 4 years of residence, the previous occupants, the Johnsons, having long bid farewell. The tug-of-war between curiosity and caution persisted as she glanced at the relic of a VCR, a nod to nostalgia. The tape whispered of a mystery waiting to be unraveled, a story veiled in worn plastic. Against her better judgment, Sarah inserted the tape into the aging machine. Static danced across the screen initially, gradually sharpening into focus to reveal a dimly lit room, a solitary figure occupying a wooden chair. "My name is Daniel Whitaker," the man's voice, tinged with quiet resolve, filled the room. "If you're watching this, they have found you, and they will find me too." Sarah watched transfixed as Whitaker's tale unfolded, a narrative of innocence tainted by circumstance, of a life upended by accusations unfounded. The camera offered glimpses of a sparse room, a transient sanctuary for a man on the run, a man falsely accused. Detective Eliza Ramirez was confronted with a cascade of enigmatic VHS tapes, each bearing the same desperate message from the elusive Daniel Whitaker, a man thrust into the spotlight as the prime suspect in a murder most foul. As she delved deeper, the case unfurled like a sinister tapestry, each thread leading to darker truths. The investigation took a sharp turn as Ramirez unearthed Catherine Walsh's involvement in a whistleblowing endeavor against PharmaCorp, a behemoth in the pharmaceutical realm. The pieces began to align, revealing a web of deceit and manipulation, with Whitaker caught in its intricate strands. Sarah Miller's world tilted further as a second package arrived, a trove of incriminating documents that laid bare the corruption festering within PharmaCorp. The puzzle pieces fell into place, connecting dots that painted a damning picture of greed and treachery. With each tape, each revelation, the truth emerged from the shadows, shedding light on a sinister plot to silence the voices of justice. Through tenacity and unwavering resolve, Ramirez, Sarah, and Whitaker pieced together a narrative of betrayal and redemption. In the quiet resolve of justice served, the VHS tapes stood as relics of a past mired in deception, testaments to the power of truth unveiled. And as Sarah and Whitaker exchanged a fleeting moment of understanding, they pondered the thin veil between fabricated lies and unyielding truth. In the end, the wrong address proved to be the gateway to redemption, a beacon of hope in a sea of darkness. The VHS tapes, once symbols of mystery and intrigue, now stood as silent witnesses to a story of courage and conviction, a reminder that sometimes the path to truth lies in the most unexpected of places. Story 11: The Enigmatic House. She crossed the threshold, the dust dancing in the stagnant air around her. The abandoned house stood frozen in time, its peeling walls and draped furniture telling tales of neglect. Every room she entered felt like a loop, each door leading back to the parlor, a strange phenomenon, a maze with no escape. Yet when she turned to leave, the front door had vanished, leaving her trapped in this eerie place. Detective Sarah Lynn found herself at the heart of a chilling mystery as she stood in the house where Morgan Pierce's life had met a tragic end. Forensic technicians moved silently through the shadows, unraveling the secrets held by the house that had become more than just a local legend. Compasses spun wildly, whispers of being watched lingered in the air, a place where urban myths met a grim reality. The medical examiner's hushed voice revealed the cause of Morgan's demise, asphyxiation, claiming her in a peaceful repose in the parlor. No signs of struggle, just a serene figure waiting for an unknown visitor. The stillness of the scene sent shivers down even the most seasoned investigator's spines, a silence pregnant with unspoken truths. The story unfolded as the investigation delved into Morgan's life, a young scholar drawn to the house's enigmatic allure. Her journal spoke of anomalies, doors leading astray, and a quest to unveil the mysteries that lay within the Victorian's walls. Her research had led her down a path of no return, one that ended in a chair facing the entrance, a chair that had claimed her life. The whispers of the house's dark reputation grew louder as messages from a mysterious correspondent hinted at secrets waiting to be uncovered. Adam Reeves, an expert in architectural anomalies, found himself entangled in a web of intrigue spun by the house's deceptive design. But his alibi stood firm, his innocence in Morgan's demise seemingly confirmed. A revelation from a distant relative shed light on a family curse hidden in the shadows of the Blackwood lineage. The claiming, they called it, a force that drew souls into the parlor to meet their peaceful end. Decades of deaths masked as natural causes, a sinister influence lurking within the house's walls. The discovery of hidden artifacts and a carved deity hinted at a darker purpose behind the house's facade. Liminal spaces, thresholds between worlds, held by ancient powers that defied comprehension. The alkaloid in Morgan's system tied her fate to forces beyond her understanding, forces that sought to claim those who dared to unravel their secrets. As the investigation deepened, a grim turn of events unfolded with Adam Reeves meeting the same fate as Morgan. The house's grip extended beyond physical boundaries, ensnaring those who delved too deep into its mysteries. A key, a final piece of the puzzle, unlocking the truth of the house's hold on those who dared to challenge its illusions. The case remained open, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked within the condemned Victorian. Whispers of lost souls and unseen visitors echoed in the night, tales of those who ventured in but never returned. The house stood as a testament to the thin veil between reality and the unknown, a place where perception could be twisted and where the truth remained as elusive as an exit in a maze of endless corridors. Story 12. The vintage Polaroid held memories frozen in time, capturing a birthday celebration long past. Faces beamed with joy, candles danced in flickering light, nothing out of the ordinary. Yet when the daughter inherited the box of old photos, she noticed it. A presence lurking in the background just beyond the group. A man shrouded in shadow, lingering on the fringes of the candle's glow. He didn't belong to the family. No one recalled his presence, and yet in each photograph he drew closer. Sarah Winters stumbled upon the collection while sorting through her late mother's attic after the funeral. A simple cardboard box marked Memories held a treasure trove of faded snapshots from her childhood, documenting family gatherings. What should have brought solace turned into the beginning of a haunting mystery. In the initial photo, he was barely discernible, a dark figure on the periphery during her 7th birthday party. By the next snapshot, he had advanced indoors, and in the following one, he loomed behind her uncle. None of the subjects in the photos seemed aware of his eerie presence. Trembling, Sarah phoned her father, describing the mysterious man in the background of every picture. His response was a silent pause followed by a sharp inhale. "What man? There should only be family," he finally uttered, perplexed. Sarah shared digital versions of the Polaroids with her father, who promptly called back, his voice tinged with unease. "This is impossible. A stranger would have been noticed." Detective Marcus Reed attentively listened as Sarah laid out the photographs on his desk at the precinct. Raindrops tapped against the windows, casting moving shadows over the evidence. With seasoned hands, the detective scrutinized each photo, his gaze narrowing. "No one recognized this individual?" he inquired, his voice neutral yet intrigued. "No one," Sarah affirmed, "but observed the progression." She arranged the photos chronologically. As the detective leaned closer, the chilling truth materialized before his eyes. The shadowy figure traversed through the party in each photo, inching closer to the children. In the final image, he hovered directly behind Sarah's younger self, a pallid hand extending towards her shoulder, just beyond the frame. "The photographer," Reed suggested, though doubt tinged his tone. "My mother took all these. She set the timer and joined the picture frame," Sarah explained. "Copies were made and a case file was opened." Within days, Detective Reed had contacted all surviving attendees of the party. None remembered the mysterious man. No outsiders had been present. The location was secluded, a countryside retreat chosen for its privacy. Facial recognition software proved futile. The figure strategically evaded detection in each shot, as if cognizant of the camera's gaze. Yet his posture exuded purpose, a deliberate intent. The investigation might have stalled if Sarah hadn't unearthed more photos in other family albums. Various gatherings, different years, yet the same figure loomed in the background, perpetually unnoticed in the moment. A computer expert enhanced the images, unveiling obscure details, a scar on the wrist, a distinctive ring, a partial reflection in a window revealing facial features previously concealed in darkness. The breakthrough came from dental records. The teeth visible in an enhanced photo matched those of Robert Keller, a maintenance worker who vanished after being linked to 3 child abductions in the region, cases that had grown cold decades ago. Cases that coincided with the events captured in the photos. Records indicated Keller had been employed by the company that serviced the vacation property hosting Sarah's birthday. He possessed master keys to multiple rental properties in the vicinity, locations where families had gathered and children had vanished. Excavating Keller's former residence, authorities unearthed small items buried beneath the concrete. A hairpin resembling one worn by a missing girl, a toy car belonging to a vanished boy, and a bracelet Sarah recognized as her own, believed lost in her childhood. Alone in her apartment, surrounded by the haunting photos, Sarah pondered the revelations that had unveiled decades-old horrors. The detective had phoned earlier with grim news of identifying remains near one of the vacation properties, a missing child confirmed through DNA analysis. Gazing at the final birthday photo, the warm glow of candles bathed her family's jubilant faces, forever preserved. And in the shadows behind her younger self, invisible to all but unmistakably present, lurked the figure, patient, calculating, the unseen observer in that moment of joy. The disclosure tied together unresolved cases spanning decades. Families received closure, albeit not the answers they sought. The shadow in the family photos had emerged into the light of justice, his long-concealed presence finally acknowledged after years of clandestine existence. Sarah carefully returned the photos to their box, now transformed into evidence. They bore witness to the chilling truth that sometimes The most perilous threats are those captured on film yet unnoticed by the naked eye, phantom figures traversing through celebrations undetected, leaving only faint traces of their passage through timeless, frozen instants. Story 13. The tale began innocently enough, shrouded in the guise of peeling wallpaper. Michael and Sarah Klein, the new occupants of the Victorian-era home, were captivated by its allure, the whispers of history echoing through its ornate woodwork and lofty ceilings. Little did they know that beneath the surface of faded paisley patterns and striped layers lay a story waiting to be unveiled. It all started with a simple water stain in the master bedroom, a yellowish blemish on the floral wallpaper catching Sarah's eye. As they delved deeper, peeling back the layers of time, they stumbled upon something unexpected, writing etched in dark ink, a name repeated endlessly, Eleanor Winters. The name seemed to dance across the wall in a frenzy of desperation, leaving the couple unsettled and intrigued. Their quest for answers led them down a winding path of mystery and intrigue. A search online revealed a single result, a missing persons case from decades past, featuring a woman whose resemblance to the previous homeowner, Margaret Cavendish, was uncanny. The pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place, painting a haunting picture of intertwined fates. Driven by curiosity turned obsession, Michael and Sarah embarked on a journey to uncover the truth behind the cryptic writings on the wall. Their investigation unearthed a tangled web of identities and secrets, leading them to a startling revelation that would shake the foundations of their reality. Hidden beneath the floorboards, they discovered a trove of identification cards bearing different names but the same face, that of Eleanor Winters. The walls of their home, once silent witnesses to a dark past, now whispered of a long-buried truth waiting to be unearthed. As forensic teams descended upon their property, guided by the echoes of the past, the mystery deepened. Ground-penetrating radar revealed anomalies beneath the surface, leading to the discovery of Eleanor's remains buried in the very ground they walked upon. The truth, when finally revealed, was more chilling than they could have imagined. The handwriting on the wall belonged not to Eleanor, but to Rebecca Eldridge, a woman consumed by a fractured mind and a desperate need to cling to reality. Her elaborate charade had deceived all who crossed her path, weaving a tapestry of deception that only time could unravel. In the end, justice was served, albeit 3 decades late. Rebecca, masquerading as Margaret Cavendish, was apprehended, her facade crumbling under the weight of her guilt. The walls of the old Victorian home bore witness to a tale of tragedy and betrayal, their silent confession echoing through the halls of history. And as Michael and Sarah gazed upon their infamous abode, now forever marked by the shadows of the past, they knew that some stories were meant to be whispered in hushed tones, lest they awaken the ghosts that linger in the walls. Story 14. The apartment lay dormant for months, a silent witness to its own secrets. When the new tenants crossed the threshold, they anticipated only the embrace of dust and perhaps the remnants of forgotten lives scattered within. But one door resisted their efforts to open it, stubbornly locked from within. A closet, its mysteries veiled in darkness. The landlord, with a reluctant sigh, forced the door ajar, revealing not the expected coats or discarded items, but something far more unsettling. The walls bore witness to a silent struggle, etched with deep, uneven scratches that spoke of desperation and confinement. In the corner, an ancient flip phone lay dormant, its screen illuminated by a single unread message. Detective Morgan Shaw, seasoned in the art of unraveling enigmas, felt a chill creep down her spine at the sight. It wasn't the overt violence that unsettled her, but the silent plea for help etched into the wood, the frantic marks of someone trapped in a suffocating darkness. Forensics. Now, she directed her partner, Officer Reed, whose camera clicked in a rhythm of its own, capturing the haunting evidence. And bring me the records of the previous tenants. The message on the phone lingered ominously. I know what you did. The landlord, a man of nerves as fragile as glass, stammered out a tale of the previous tenant's abrupt departure, leaving behind unpaid rent. A quiet young woman, no trouble, left without a word about 6 months past. His eyes flitted nervously, evading the closet's gaping maw. Forensic analysis unveiled a chilling truth. Within the scratches on the walls, traces of blood intertwined with the desperate carvings, most belonging to a single person, presumably the missing tenant. Emma Caldwell, aged 28, reported absent from her workplace after a sudden disappearance. Yet 2 sets of DNA emerged from the shadows. One remained a mystery to the system, while the other belonged to a man supposedly deceased for 2 years. This cannot be, Shaw murmured, her gaze locked on the perplexing report. Emma's apartment whispered a tale of disrupted existence, neglected mail, a solitary coffee mug left unwashed, a bed meticulously made. Her phone records painted a narrative of dwindling connections, regular calls to her sister interrupted abruptly, replaced by a flurry of unknown numbers in the weeks leading to her vanishing. The sister mentioned a new boyfriend, Reed relayed. No name, just intense and private. Surveillance footage unveiled a shadow in the night, a man in a baseball cap, tailing Emma into the building, his features shielded from prying eyes. The puzzle pieces clicked into place when partial fingerprints belonging to Derek Mercer were discovered on the closet's interior doorknob. He staged his demise, Shaw deduced. But why and how does Emma fit into his macabre design? The enigma deepened as the unidentified DNA led to another missing person, Lynette Porter, vanished 3 years prior, her description aligning with a visitor neighbors had spied at Emma's doorstep. Shaw's gaze pierced the darkness as she pieced together the shadows in the tapestry of deceit. A car linked to Mercer's mother prowled near Emma's abode, the driver a match to Derek's stature and build. The trail wound its way to a secluded estate owned by Mercer's kin, where behind heavy doors, Lynette Porter awaited a specter of captivity, mirroring Emma's plight. He made me watch, Lynette murmured, her eyes vacant, recounting a tale of coercion and confinement. Evidence accumulated, a symphony of Mercer's obsession with control, snapshots of women resembling Emma and Lynette, and damningly, videos of Emma's harrowing ordeal within the closet. She thought she could expose me, Mercer's voice echoed in the recordings. No one reveals my truths. The pursuit for Derek Mercer spanned borders, a hunt for a specter of darkness that reveled in inflicting torment. As psychologists delved into his psyche, a portrait emerged that sent shivers down the spines of seasoned investigators. Mercer's thirst was not solely for blood, but for the slow erosion of hope witnessed within confined spaces. At last he was apprehended at a bus terminal, bearing a new identity and a ticket to a distant shore, his bag concealing tools of malevolence and a fragment of Emma's tale. During interrogation, Mercer's demeanor remained eerily serene. She penned that message herself, he declared of the phone. She yearned to be discovered, but she was unworthy of salvation. The trial peeled back the layers of Mercer's elaborate ruse, a charade of death crafted with the bones of a homeless man who matched his appearance. For years, he had stalked the shadows, targeting women reminiscent of his first victim. Emma's remains eluded discovery, her final moments etched in the futile scratchings on the closet walls. The jury swiftly returned a verdict, sealing Mercer's fate with a life sentence bereft of reprieve. His smile, faint and enigmatic, hinted at a private satisfaction known only to him. In the courtroom's hush, Lynette Porter's voice rang out, a beacon of resilience amidst the darkness. He locked us in caverns of his own making, his mind ensnared in shadows, but as he withers in his cell, I shall stand in the light. The case reshaped protocols, a cautionary tale in the annals of missing persons investigations, emphasizing patterns of relationships and scrutiny of rental abodes. Detective Shaw preserved the closet door from Emma's abode, a talisman of survival amidst the chaos. For sometimes, the most harrowing crime scenes are not drenched in crimson, but etched in the silent struggles of those fighting for breath in the suffocating dark. Story 15. The small town nestled among the towering trees had a secret, one that whispered in the wind but never passed the lips of its residents. At the edge of the woods, a house stood in solitude, its presence eerie yet alluring. The windows gazed out like darkened eyes, the porch bowed under the weight of time's relentless march. No one laid claim to the house, no one dared to speak of its origins. It simply existed, a silent sentinel at the fringe of the forest. It was a group of curious hikers who stumbled upon the house, drawn by an unseen force. As they drew near, their eyes widened in shock. Names were carved into the wooden siding, etched deep as if to serve as haunting reminders. Among the list of 27 names, one stood out fresh and untouched by the hands of time, a name unknown to any of them except for one. With a trembling voice, a hiker whispered, "That's mine." In the dead of night, a call came into the local dispatch, marking it as a routine trespassing incident. The voice on the line belonged to Mason Wright, the lead hiker who claimed ownership of the mysterious name on the house. Expecting a simple case of mischief, the responding officers ventured into the woods, unaware of the chilling truth that awaited them. Detective Sarah Keller arrived as darkness cloaked the forest in shadows. Her flashlight beam pierced the night, revealing the weathered facade of the house. The names, etched into the wood, told a grim tale of vanished souls. Each name belonged to a hiker reported missing over the years, their disappearances shrouded in mystery. Mason Wright, bewildered and fearful, denied any connection to the house or its haunting engravings. The investigation unveiled a grim pattern. All the missing hikers had vanished while trekking alone in the woods. Forensic analysis of the carvings revealed a macabre timeline of disappearances spanning decades. As the investigators delved deeper, a sense of foreboding settled over them. Mason's companions were questioned, revealing eerie sightings in photographs taken during their hike. A spectral figure, tall and slender, lurked in the background, unseen by the naked eye but captured by the lens. A search of the house's interior uncovered a chilling tableau in the basement. Personal belongings of the missing hikers were meticulously arranged, each item bearing a name from the wall outside. Bloodstains, faded but not forgotten, hinted at dark deeds committed within those walls. Mason's demeanor grew increasingly paranoid, haunted by unseen forces that stalked his every move. The revelation of the house's previous owner, Victor Blackwood, a reclusive hunter with a sinister past, added a new layer of dread to the unfolding mystery. A journal found in a hidden hunting blind detailed Blackwood's twisted obsession with hunting humans, with entries describing his victims in chilling detail. The manhunt for Blackwood spanned jurisdictions, but the elusive hunter remained one step ahead, leaving only whispers of his presence. As the net closed in on Blackwood, Mason Wright vanished without a trace, leaving behind a cryptic message on his bedroom wall. The hunt for both men intensified, leading to a shocking discovery in the depths of the house, a workshop poised for a new victim, the lead forensic technician. Surveillance measures were heightened, a desperate attempt to ensnare the elusive predator. When a figure emerged from the forest, unnaturally tall and thin, the trap was set. But in a blink, the figure vanished, slipping through the grasp of the waiting authorities. To this day, the house stands as a silent witness to the dark secrets that lie within the woods. Mason Wright and the technician were never found, their fates intertwined with the enigmatic house and its cursed history. The names on the wall remain a whispered legend, a cautionary tale for those who dare to tread where shadows linger. The investigation continues, a haunting reminder of the mysteries that lurk in the heart of the forest. Story 16, The Mystery of Reflections. She cleared the mist from the mirror, gazing at her own reflection. Yet a sense of unease crept in. Her features appeared normal, her attire unchanged. But the longer she peered, the more the disquiet swelled within her. A flicker caught in the corner of her eye, a subtle movement not of her own making. When she turned away, her reflection remained motionless, observing. Thus began the enigmatic saga of Rebecca Thorne, sparked by that unsettling moment in her bathroom. What followed would baffle investigators and cast a shadow over the community for years to come. Rebecca resided alone in a humble apartment nestled in a serene suburban enclave. Known for her methodical nature and reserved demeanor, she kept to herself while maintaining a polite rapport with her neighbors. Her occupation as a data analyst at a mid-sized firm dictated a life governed by routine and exactitude. There was nothing about her that hinted at her eventual role in one of the most enigmatic criminal puzzles of the era. Initially, the anomalies seemed trivial. Rebecca noticed slight disruptions in her living space. Items shifted, not missing, but rearranged. A coffee mug on a different shelf, books rearranged, her toothbrush in an unfamiliar spot. She brushed off these odd occurrences as mere lapses, attributing them to the strain of long hours spent scrutinizing spreadsheets under harsh fluorescent lights. Detective Marion Shaw received the initial complaint when Rebecca, after enduring weeks of these disturbances, finally sought help from the authorities. The initial evaluation suggested no criminal activity, leaning towards a mental health concern rather than a matter for law enforcement. Shaw logged the grievance but consigned it to the stack of non-urgent cases. There was no concrete evidence, Shaw would later recount. No signs of forced entry, no missing items, just a woman plagued by a sense of unease in her own home. However, everything changed after the incident with the bathroom mirror. During her subsequent interaction with the police, Rebecca vividly recounted how her reflection seemed to move independently, how she felt scrutinized even in solitude. This time, she provided proof. Footage from a security camera she had installed directed at her front door. The recording unveiled something that sent shivers through even the most seasoned officers. The grainy video captured Rebecca leaving for work in the morning, followed by an exact replica of her entering the apartment 20 minutes later using a key. Forensic experts scrutinized the footage for signs of tampering or digital manipulation, finding none. The intruder moved like Rebecca, dressed like her, even carried her distinctive leather bag. Yet, according to time-stamped footage from her workplace security system, Rebecca had already swiped into her office building downtown. "We're facing a doppelganger scenario," Detective Shaw informed her superior. "Someone who has meticulously studied Ms. Thorne and can mimic her with uncanny precision." The investigation intensified. Fingerprints found throughout the apartment matched only Rebecca's. No foreign DNA surfaced. Neighbors reported nothing out of the ordinary, just Rebecca going about her daily routine. A neighbor, Mrs. Keller, mentioned encountering Rebecca upon her return home one evening and receiving no response, a deviation from her typical behavior but not a cause for alarm. Rebecca commenced documenting the disturbances in a journal. Minor alterations in her living quarters escalated. Food she hadn't eaten vanished from her fridge. Her computer displayed searches she hadn't conducted. Most disconcerting were the photos on her phone selfies resembling her yet taken without her recollection. In some images, her countenance appeared subtly askew, the smile too wide, the eyes too intense. "I feel as though I'm losing my mind," she confided to Detective Shaw during their third meeting. "Or perhaps someone is orchestrating this to make me believe so." A breakthrough arrived when a pattern emerged in the security footage. The doppelganger only infiltrated when Rebecca left for specific engagements, therapy sessions, yoga classes, Sunday morning grocery runs, pre-planned activities with predictable durations. "Someone possesses an intimate knowledge of your routine," explained Shaw. "This isn't random, it's targeted surveillance and infiltration." A forensic psychologist postulated that they were dealing with a fixation case, a person fixated on assuming Rebecca's identity, perhaps aiming to supplant her entirely. Such instances were rare but documented in psychological archives. The perpetrator typically experienced a psychological rupture and fixated on a victim symbolizing attributes they coveted: stability, beauty, success, normality. The inquiry narrowed when Rebecca mentioned a former co-worker, Lily Winters, who had been terminated due to escalating erratic behavior. Lily had closely collaborated with Rebecca, often remarking on their similarities. Following her dismissal, she sent Rebecca a series of unsettling emails, one of which read, "We could be the same person. Sometimes I feel more like you than you do." Detective Shaw obtained a warrant to search Lily's residence. What they uncovered transformed the case from unsettling to nightmarish. One chamber in Lily's abode had been transformed into a shrine-like replica of Rebecca's bedroom. The walls were plastered with photos, countless snapshots of Rebecca entering her apartment, shopping, socializing, all captured without her awareness. A wardrobe held exact copies of Rebecca's attire. Makeup mirroring Rebecca's preferred brands adorned a vanity table beside meticulous notes on her mannerisms, speech patterns, and daily routines. The most incriminating evidence came in the form of practice videos. Lily had recorded herself imitating Rebecca's gait, gestures, expressions. The evolution was evident. Initial attempts were clumsy and conspicuous, later iterations nearly indistinguishable from the genuine Rebecca. "She aspired to be me," murmured Rebecca upon viewing the evidence. "She wasn't merely mimicking me, she was obliterating me." Technicians uncovered sophisticated tools for replicating keys and cloning electronic access cards. Lily had maintained an intricate system to monitor Rebecca's movements, including a calendar with detailed forecasts of her schedule. What remained ambiguous was Lily's ultimate objective. Journals recovered from her dwelling contained rambling entries that alternated between first and third person, sometimes referring to Rebecca as me and her in the same paragraph. The final entry sent chills down the investigators' spines. "Soon, only one of us will prevail. The stronger entity will endure." When authorities moved to apprehend Lily, she had vanished. Her residence bore signs of a hurried departure, drawers left ajar, certain technology missing. A nationwide alert was issued. Rebecca was relocated to a secure facility under constant surveillance. Over 3 weeks, authorities monitored every site linked to her past life. Lily remained elusive. The case took a chilling turn when a security officer at Rebecca's former workplace reported an anomaly. Rebecca had been sighted entering the premises despite being on leave. Surveillance footage confirmed the sighting. A figure identical to Rebecca had utilized a valid ID card to access the building, proceeded to her former workstation, and spent 40 minutes perusing her files before departing. Meanwhile, the real Rebecca, safeguarded in a secure location, couldn't have been present at the office. The implications became evident. Lily hadn't fled, she had made her move. She was now assuming Rebecca's identity, stepping into her existence while the genuine Rebecca remained concealed. The case remains officially unresolved. Lily Winters remains at large. Rebecca Thorne never returned to her former life, opting to forge a new persona in an undisclosed whereabouts. Detective Shaw preserves a photograph on her desk, two women strikingly similar. One is Rebecca Thorne, the other Lily Winters. At times, she scrutinizes their visages, seeking disparities, the subtleties that would set them apart. The truly unnerving aspect Shaw imparts to new recruits is not that someone could resemble or sound like you. It's the desire to assume your identity so intensely that they erase themselves in the process. Identity isn't merely our exterior facade, it's our most guarded possession. And at times, we only realize its worth when someone endeavors to purloin it. Story 17. In the quiet stillness of a quaint attic, a discovery was made by unsuspecting souls. Hidden beneath a worn blanket lay a porcelain doll, its delicate features whispering of a forgotten past. Its blue eyes, painted with a haunting gaze, seemed to hold secrets untold. Sarah and Michael, a young couple entranced by the charm of a Victorian house they had acquired, stumbled upon this mysterious artifact and dismissed it as just another relic of time gone by. But as night descended and the world hushed into slumber, an unsettling presence lingered in the air. The weight of silence pressed upon them, and a sense of unease tiptoed through the shadows. When dawn broke, the doll was no longer nestled in the attic's embrace. It had found its way to the foot of their bed, a silent sentinel in the dim morning light. The tale took a darker turn when Detective Rachel Winters was summoned on a crisp autumn day to a scene shrouded in mystery. In the master bedroom, a woman's life had been stolen, her body arranged in a macabre display, limbs contorted at unnatural angles, eyes wide with terror. Nearby, the male victim lay as if fleeing from an unseen horror, the perfection of the scene chilling in its meticulous design. With a quiet intensity, Detective Winters delved into the enigma that surrounded the house, interviewing neighbors whose whispers added layers of disquiet to the unfolding narrative. Shadows seen moving behind curtains, echoes of childlike laughter in the dead of night, the threads of fear woven into the fabric of the investigation grew ever tighter. Forensic examinations unveiled a trail of vintage fibers, reminiscent of antique doll clothing, leading a path from the victims to the attic's depths. Absent were any traces of an intruder, no fingerprints, no foreign DNA, no signs of a struggle beyond the eerie stillness that hung in the air like a shroud of dread. As the detective traced the history of the property, a pattern emerged, a lineage of tragedy etched into the walls, each previous owner meeting an untimely end under inexplicable circumstances. Whispers of haunted toys and phantom footsteps echoed through time, painting a portrait of a house steeped in sorrow. A faded newspaper clipping whispered of a doll maker and his tragic daughter, their lives intertwined with the very walls of the house. A doll, rumored to hold a piece of the girl's essence, stood at the heart of the mystery, its presence a harbinger of doom for those who dared disturb its slumber. The truth unfurled like a sinister tapestry as old photographs revealed the doll in different poses, a spectral presence captured in moments of fleeting movement. Traces of tiny handprints, invisible to the naked eye, painted a spectral trail from the attic to the master bedroom, a chilling testament to a presence unseen yet undeniably real. In a whispered confession from a distant relative of the dollmaker, tales of arcane rituals and dark arts surfaced, hinting at a legacy of twisted creations bound by more than mere mortals could comprehend. The line between imagination and reality blurred, leaving the investigation suspended in a haze of the unknown. And so the house changed hands once more, its troubled past a whispered warning to those who dared tread its haunted halls. The attic, now an empty canvas of dust and shadows, held only the memory of a doll lost to time. Detective Winters, her tenure marked by the unsolved riddle of the dollmaker's curse, retired into the quiet unknown, carrying with her a silent vow never to unearth the photograph that bore witness to a dark legacy. As the years passed and the house stood silent, a new chapter unfolded in whispers and shadows. Neighbors spoke of fleeting glimpses, a small figure moving behind the attic window, the echo of a child's laughter dancing on the wind. The doll, a ghostly specter of forgotten days, remained a tale whispered in the hallowed halls of the detective department, a mystery unsolved yet never truly forgotten. Story 18: The Hidden Observer. The realtor's listing made no mention of a basement. The blueprints offered no clue to its existence. Yet beneath the old carpet in the Mercer family's new home, a door lay hidden, its rusted handle a silent invitation. With collective effort, they pried it open, releasing a rush of stale air heavy with the aroma of damp earth. The steps descended into darkness, leading them into the unknown. Anticipating storage space, they were greeted instead by a single chair beneath a swaying light bulb. A row of photographs adorned the wall behind them, capturing moments from their own lives within these very walls. The Mercer family had moved in during winter, seeking character and history in their new suburban abode, unaware of the chilling history entwined with their present. Detective Sarah Connors arrived at the scene, where the basement revealed its eerie secrets. The crime scene team worked diligently, documenting every detail of the clandestine chamber. 37 photographs, each depicting the Mercer family in intimate moments, raised unsettling questions with no easy answers. As the investigation delved deeper, a sinister pattern emerged. Previous owners, each staying for a brief period, had unknowingly shared their lives with an unseen voyeur. The house's dark past intertwined with the present, blurring the lines between reality and nightmare. Forensic analysis uncovered hidden surveillance equipment, revealing a twisted obsession with the families who had come and gone. The mastermind behind the surveillance, Edward Kelvin, had vanished into the shadows of his own creation, a hidden labyrinth within the walls. Kelvin's delusions painted the families as actors in his private theater, unwitting participants in his voyeuristic pursuits. The families, disturbed by the violation of their privacy, fled the house, leaving behind a legacy of fear and mistrust. The trial exposed Kelvin's meticulous planning, turning the house itself into a tool for his voyeurism. As the property was razed to the ground, the families carried the weight of unseen eyes watching them, lingering in the hidden corners of their minds. In the silence of night, they found themselves glancing at air vents and light fixtures, questioning the true extent of their solitude. The specter of Edward Kelvin's presence haunted them, a reminder that some secrets lie buried within the walls, waiting to be discovered in the stillness of the night. Story 19. The wooden plank shifted under her weight, catching her attention with a subtle whisper of movement. As she knelt down to inspect, her fingers traced the edges, sensing the hidden truth beneath the facade of the floor. It was not solid, it was a veil concealing a secret. With delicate precision, she lifted the boards, unveiling a dark and narrow space that lay clandestine beneath her new home. In the dim light, she discerned the outlines of a mattress, a chair, and in the shadows, a worn notebook filled with pages inscribed with her name repeated over and over. Detective Morgan Reed observed silently as Sarah Coleman gazed into the abyss beneath the floor, a mixture of fear and curiosity flickering in her eyes. It was more than just the discovery of a hidden chamber. It was a violation of her sanctuary, an intrusion of malevolence into the sanctuary of her fresh beginning. "Do not disturb anything else," Detective Reed cautioned, her voice a steady anchor in the unsettling silence. She clicked on her flashlight, casting a beam that exposed the walls adorned with surveillance photograph snapshots of Sarah's daily life, a shrine of obsession meticulously maintained right below her unsuspecting feet. Sarah had acquired the quaint cottage from the estate of an elderly recluse named Walter Green, a man who had departed the world leaving behind no kin. The property had languished unoccupied for months before Sarah's purchase. The listing had painted a picture of charm and minor renovations needed, with no hint of the hidden chamber lurking beneath. "I never met him, the previous owner," Sarah murmured. "The neighbors said he kept to himself. The basement was supposed to be sealed off long ago." That's what the inspection report claimed. As the crime scene investigators arrived, their equipment echoing against the wooden floors, they meticulously documented every detail, extracting the mattress, chair, and notebook from the clandestine space. Forensic analysis unveiled a plethora of fingerprints belonging solely to Walter Green, spread across the chamber. What unsettled the investigators most was the timeline. They unraveled one that indicated Walter had been observing Sarah for at least 3 years before his demise. He had shadowed her everyday routines, blending into the background of her life without her ever noticing his presence. "The level of fixation suggests escalation," explained the department psychologist during a somber debriefing. "The transition from fantasy to a chilling reality. The hidden chamber hints at darker intentions, a preparation for something more direct." Detective Reed's inquiries took a surprising turn when she interviewed a former coworker of Walter's from the local shopping center maintenance team. The man shifted uncomfortably, fiddling with his wedding band as he shared. He spoke of her at times. Said she reminded him of someone. "I thought it was harmless admiration. I never imagined," his words trailed off, lost in the weight of the revelation. "Did he ever mention any plans involving her?" Reed probed further. "Not plans, but he had this phrase he'd repeat. 'She belongs with me.' I took it as idle chatter." A warrant led Reed to Walter's untouched workplace locker, revealing a key that unlocked a storage unit registered in his name. The metallic door creaked open, unveiling a meticulous replica of Sarah's former living space within a haunting mirroring of her past life meticulously recreated. A mannequin with a wig styled like Sarah's sat at a replica desk, a calendar ominously marked with a date just a week following Walter's fatal heart attack, bearing the word "together" in bold red ink. Further investigations unveiled Walter's troubled past, marked by a youthful institutionalization due to an obsession with a teacher. Diagnosed with erotomania, a delusion of unrequited love, Walter had lived a quiet life until Sarah unwittingly triggered his dormant fixation. At the police station, Reed laid out the evidence, highlighting Walter's warped belief in a destined connection with Sarah. Could she have crossed paths with him unknowingly, sparking this obsession? A fellow detective pondered. Reed shook her head solemnly. There's no trace of an encounter. Sometimes these fixations need only a flicker to ignite, a passing glance, a fleeting smile that could be all it takes for someone with his history. Sarah made the difficult decision to part ways with the house, forever tainted by the shadows of Walter's obsession. During the final walkthrough with her realtor, she stood in the living room, haunted by thoughts of what could have been if not for the loose floorboard that unveiled the chilling truth. How long would I have dwelled here, unaware of his watchful eyes, unaware of the secrets veiled beneath my very feet, she murmured softly. The case closed with Walter's demise, classified as stalking with intent, though the abduction never materialized. Sarah relocated, adopting new routines and shielding her personal information more vigilantly. Detective Reed kept a discreet eye on her, a silent vigil acknowledging how narrowly Sarah had evaded becoming another tragedy. The cottage found new owners, oblivious to its dark history, the hidden chamber sealed and the floorboards replaced. Life carried on, but for those privy to the truth, the tale of the room beneath the floor lingered as a cautionary whisper of unseen perils, of monsters that fade before capture, and of victims who skirt the edge of their own demise, unaware of the darkness that once lurked beneath their very steps. Story 20. It began with a pocket dial, a mere accidental transmission of static and muffled sounds. Initially dismissed by the operator, it soon escalated when a voice broke through the chaos. A woman's urgent whisper sliced through the airwaves, "He's here," and then an eerie silence descended. The mysterious call originated from an empty house, a forsaken abode left untouched for years. No signs of intrusion, no disturbances to be found. Yet amidst the layers of dust in the neglected kitchen, the phone rested on the counter, its screen faintly aglow. The call had transpired mere moments before. Detective Morgan Reed, plagued by the haunting whisper, replayed the recording for the 5th time. The voice echoed in her mind desperation, fear, and an inexplicable impossibility. The property had once belonged to the Sullivan family, who had vacated the premises after a devastating house fire that ravaged the West Wing. Since then, the house remained uninhabited. The caretaker's monthly visits attested that no one had trespassed in years. Background check on the number, Morgan inquired of her partner, Detective Walsh. The inquiry unveiled that the number belonged to Catherine Sullivan, the deceased daughter of the former owners. Catherine had perished in a car accident 3 years prior. Morgan scrutinized the evidence bag containing the phone, grappling with the enigma before her. A deceased woman's phone making calls from a deserted dwelling, a puzzle with no apparent solution. The forensic team's search yielded little. No discernible fingerprints on the device, only elusive smudges defying identification. No footprints leading in or out of the house. The doors remained locked, the windows sealed shut. The recording, a mere 11 seconds of static, breaths, and 5 chilling words, became the focal point of their inquiry. Voice analysis confirmed a 98% match to Catherine Sullivan's voice from archived recordings. The call had occurred at the precise moment of Catherine's demise 3 years earlier, down to the minute. Morgan and Walsh delved into Catherine's past, interviewing all who had known her. Her father, now remarried, appeared genuinely perplexed. Her mother, residing alone in a modest apartment, crumbled upon hearing the recording. "That's my Katie," she murmured. "She sounds so afraid." Mark Jennings, Catherine's boyfriend at the time of her passing, had a verified alibi for the night of the call. He was on a night shift at the hospital, corroborated by witnesses and security footage. Moreover, the house stood vacant. The call should have been impossible, yet it had occurred. The investigation reached an impasse until a call from Catherine's mother reignited the inquiry. "I found something in her belongings," she quivered. Katie kept a journal, the final entry. "You must see it." Within the journal lay meticulous entries chronicling Catherine's relationship with Mark, the affectionate beginnings, the emergence of control, isolation, and ultimately fear. The last entry forewarned, "He's discovered I'm leaving. He's enraged. If something happens to me, it won't be an accident. Confronted once more, Mark's facade crumbled under the weight of the journal's revelations. "You suspect me of harming Katie due to her words," he retorted. "That's not evidence." Morgan pointed out, "You were the first responder at the accident scene before emergency services." Mark's complexion drained. "I was concerned when she didn't arrive. I went searching for her. Her car veered off a secluded road. How did you know where to look?" His demeanor faltered. "I told you I was worried." Revisiting the accident site, investigators unearthed Catherine's actual phone buried 20 feet from the crash site. The phone retrieved from the house was her backup, stored at her parents' residence. Examination of the buried phone unveiled erased texts between Catherine and her sister on the night of her demise. "Mark discovered I'm leaving him. He's trailing me in his car." Subsequent messages disclosed, "He's forcing me off the road." A revaluation of photographs from Catherine's autopsy revealed injuries inconsistent with the car crash alone. Defensive wounds on her hands, bruising indicative of strangulation. Upon their attempt to arrest Mark, he had vanished. His abode harbored a shrine to Catherine photographs, pilfered mementos, and articles detailing her demise. Among his possessions, investigators uncovered audio manipulation software and scripts illustrating how he engineered the ghost call by splicing Catherine's voice from past recordings. The call had been his macabre game, a ploy to obfuscate the truth from investigators and Catherine's bereaved family. Expanding the investigation, authorities unearthed 2 more suspicious deaths of young women linked to Mark, both deemed accidents. Both had been romantically involved with him. 6 days into the pursuit, officers sighted Mark's vehicle outside the Sullivan residence. Within, he sat in the kitchen, fixated on a phone identical to Catherine's. Surrendering without resistance, he confessed to Morgan during questioning. "She wouldn't cease speaking, even after I silenced her. She persisted, accusing me. I needed everyone to hear her, to believe she lingered somewhere out there. A spirit cannot testify against me." The jury swiftly rendered a verdict of guilty for Mark's first-degree murder charges. As the judgment echoed, Catherine's mother clung to the journal, finding solace in the long-awaited justice. Catherine's voice, encapsulated in her words, her fears immortalized in ink, had ultimately prevailed. The phone from the forsaken house now rests in the evidence vault. Occasionally, officers claimed to hear its phantom ring, though its battery had long been removed. Catherine's tale endures, not as a spectral yarn, but as a testament that victims discover a voice, even when silenced. Story 21. In the quiet neighborhood, a house stood silent and vacant for years. Whispers among the neighbors spoke of the young woman who had disappeared, leaving the home untouched by life since. Yet when the new tenants crossed the threshold, they encountered a locked bedroom, a mystery waiting to unfold. With effort, they forced the door open, revealing a room shrouded in stillness, the air thick with the weight of neglect. The bed lay neatly made, the mirror devoid of dust. A single candle stood on the desk, its wax melted to nothingness, frozen tears of flame. And there upon the surface lay an open notebook, its pages adorned with fresh ink. The final entry, dated the night of her vanishing, beckoned for attention. Detective Morgan, a seeker of truths, delved into the notebook's contents as technicians combed the room for hidden secrets. The words within belonged to Elise Winters, a woman of 26 who had vanished without a trace, her existence a haunting echo in the room. Her script danced across the paper in precise strokes, a story unfolding with each turn of the page. Yet in the final entry, a sense of urgency gripped the ink, leaving imprints on the blank sheets that followed. "I know he's watching me tonight," the words whispered. "The car passes, a silent threat. I've cried for aid to deaf ears. If fate befalls me, know it was no chance." Closing the notebook, the detective preserved it as evidence, the room lingering with the scent of dust and an elusive chemical fragrance. The landlord, a figure of unease, stood in the doorway, recounting his assurance that every corner had been searched before the house was listed. Elise, a paralegal entwined in the web of Harriman and Associates, a realm of corporate intrigue and deceit, her disappearance a mystery veiled in shadows. Colleagues spoke of her diligence, her withdrawal in the days leading to her absence, a tale of late nights of unsettling discoveries in confidential files. The detective gazed upon photographs of Elise, a woman of calculation and poise, her presence too deliberate to vanish without a trace. The room, a tableau frozen in time, offered scant clues, no hint of struggle or violence, only the essence of an interrupted existence. The investigation unfurled, revealing hidden truths buried within the room's confines. A key, a flash drive a gateway to revelations hidden in the shadows. Financial transactions, manipulated data, a web of deception entwining Westridge Pharmaceuticals and Harriman and Associates. The veil of lies lifted, exposing the darkness that had permeated Elise's final days. As the digital whispers unfolded, a narrative of greed and deceit emerged, the truth a beacon piercing the veil of secrecy. Neurapax, a drug tainted by manipulation, its victims silent witnesses to a crime concealed in shadows. The threads of justice began to weave, drawing closer to those who thought themselves untouchable. The room, a silent witness to Elise's final stand, a testament to her courage in the face of corruption. The hidden passage, a gateway to the truth veiled in darkness, unveiled by persistence and determination. Vincent Harriman, a man of influence, faced the reckoning of his deeds, the echoes of Elise's voice haunting his every denial. In the courtroom, justice found its mark, the truth echoing through the halls of power. Elise's legacy, a room frozen in time, a testament to her unwavering pursuit of truth. The house, a silent sentinel of secrets exposed, a cautionary tale whispered among the locals. As night falls, a light flickers in the upstairs window, a gentle glow illuminating the room where a woman's spirit lingers. Elise Winters, a name etched in history, her story a beacon of justice prevailing against the darkness. The house stands empty, a monument to a life lost but not forgotten, a reminder that even in silence, the truth will find its voice. Story 22, the coffee shop had been his sanctuary for countless mornings, same spot, same brew, same tranquility. The barista recognized his face, yet his name remained a mystery to all. Then one fateful day he failed to appear. When the authorities investigated his usual haunt, they stumbled upon a wallet left abandoned. Inside, a driver's license offered a glimpse of his visage, but his identity remained a void, devoid of a name or address. A peculiar emptiness where his essence should have been. Detective Sarah Mercer delved into the enigma, her touch cold against the unforgiving metal table as she replayed the security footage. The enigmatic figure, now dubbed John Doe in the investigative records, seemed unassuming on screen. Of average stature, with nondescript features, clad in a navy coat and toting a weathered leather bag, his unremarkable presence made his vanishing act all the more disquieting. "Play it once more," she directed the tech expert. The footage unveiled John's entrance during the bustling morning rush. He ordered his usual black coffee, sans sugar, and settled at the secluded table, partly concealed by a verdant plant. There he sat, unfolding a notebook, penning mysterious entries. Now and then he would sip his coffee, gaze out the window. Then came the pivotal instant. He laid his wallet on the table, rose, and strode towards the restroom corridor. Yet he never returned, never emerged through any exit. He simply evaporated into thin air. "Inspect the restroom footage," Mercer urged. "That's the curious part," the specialist replied. He never set foot in any restroom, every camera angle scrutinized. It's as if he dissolved into nothingness. Back at the precinct, Mercer sifted through the wallet's contents strewn across her desk. The driver's license photo mirrored their enigmatic man, yet the personal details were mere blanks. Credit cards devoid of names, only strings of numbers leading to phantom accounts. Neatly stacked cash, a receipt from the coffee shop dated days prior, and a solitary business card blank save for a faintly printed phone number in gray. Upon dialing the number, silence greeted her ears save for the rustling of paper as if pages turned. After moments, the call abruptly ended. The barista, a familiar face in John's routine, offered scant insight. He seldom spoke, respectful though generous tips, perhaps an accent, but spoken so softly, hard to discern. Did he socialize here, engage in conversations? Mercer inquired. Never, always solitary, engrossed in that notebook. The notebook remained on the table beside the forsaken wallet, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and coded text. Department cryptographers grappled to decode its secrets. Intriguing sketches of unfamiliar architectural designs adorned some pages. Mercer dispatched officers to scour the vicinity with John Doe's images. None recognized him. No missing persons reports matched his description. His fingerprints eluded all databases. It was as though he existed solely within the coffee shop's confines. During her scrutiny, Mercer noticed an anomaly in the security footage. Each morning, as John entered the shop, the camera's timestamp flickered momentarily. The specialist dismissed it as a glitch, but Mercer harbored doubts. Returning to the coffee shop, she occupied his table, surveying the entrance and the hallway towards the restrooms. Between them hung an ancient mirror, its frame intricately etched with symbols akin to those in John's notebook. Upon questioning the shop owner, Mercer learned of the mirror's history. It's been here eons, predates my tenure, heavy as sin requires two to shift. Has it ever been relocated, cleaned, or redecorated? Not in my time. Why? Mercer approached the mirror, her reflection bearing a subtle distortion, exuding an uncanny warmth upon contact. The forensics team arrived, unearthing a concealed compartment behind the mirror. Within lay a cache of identical wallets, each housing a license with the same blank details. Adjacent rested a leather-bound journal chronicling entries spanning decades, scribed in the same hand as the abandoned notebook. The final entry read, "The experiment draws to a close. They draw near. The window narrows." Fingerprints throughout the secret space all matched John Doe. The earliest wallet's carbon dating hinted at its antiquity, yet the visage remained timeless. The journal alluded to experiments in temporal displacement and identity transference, mentioning crossing back and window points. One passage seized Mercer's attention. The coffee shop serves as a nexus, a juncture of realities. The mirror is the portal. When convergence aligns, transit becomes feasible. As the inquiry deepened, eerie occurrences enveloped the coffee shop. Patrons witnessed their reflections moving independently in the window glass. Some claimed to glimpse John Doe at his table, though surveillance footage contradicted. The breakthrough arose when an elderly woman, Margaret Keller, a former physicist involved in clandestine projects, reached out to the police. She identified John Doe as Daniel Weston, a brilliant physicist who vanished during experiments with quantum mirror surfaces theorized to facilitate interreality matter transference. Documents corroborated Weston's presumed demise in a lab incident, aligning with the journal's earliest entry. He posited that our world coexists with others, Keller elucidated. Certain sites serve as weak points between these realms, gateways for traversal. Armed with this revelation, Mercer revisited the coffee shop. The establishment stood on the remnants of the research facility where Weston had twirled. directly atop the laboratory where his enigma unfolded. The denouement struck when Mercer, alone one late night reviewing footage, discerned a detail previously overlooked. Reflected in the mirror background, John Doe Daniel Weston observed himself seated at a table. Two iterations of the same man coexisting in a surreal ballet. Rushing to the coffee shop to verify, Mercer found the mirror shattered upon the floor. Amidst the shards lay a final missive scribed in the familiar hand. The experiment concludes. The portal seals shut. Do not pursue. The enigma of the phantom man lingers unsolved. The coffee shop shuttered post-inquiry, the edifice razed in due course. Weston's remains eluded discovery. His writings vanished from the evidence vault under mysterious circumstances. Mercer parted ways with the force not long after. Neighbors occasionally glimpse her on the porch, feverishly penning in a notebook akin to Weston's. A fragment of the antique mirror adorns her wall, its surface sporadically rippling when unobserved. Story 23. Once upon a time, there was a mere glitch in the baby monitor's feed. At first, the mother brushed it off as mere interference, a blip in the technological realm. But then the audio crackled, and a voice, soft as a whisper, pierced through the static. SHHH, go back to sleep. A chill ran down her spine, freezing her in place. Hastily she dashed towards her son's room, heart hammering against her ribs, only to find the crib empty, devoid of the precious bundle that should have been nestled within. The window remained closed, the door securely locked. The only anomaly in the room was a stuffed rabbit, its once innocent eyes now dark and unblinking, staring up at her, almost accusingly. Rebecca's screams echoed through the walls until her voice was raw, a primal cry that pierced the night. The neighbors, stirred by her distress, reached out to emergency services, and soon the nursery was filled with flashing lights and the somber faces of investigators. There she sat, clutching the stuffed rabbit to her chest, swaying back and forth on the cold nursery floor, lost in a nightmare that had become all too real. The investigation began, shrouded in shadows of mystery. No signs of forced entry marred the home's security. The surveillance system stood vigilant throughout the night, capturing nothing but the eerie voice and static on the baby monitor. How could an intruder slip in, snatch a child, and vanish without a trace, leaving behind only a haunting presence in the form of a stuffed toy? Whispers spread like wildfire through the community, casting suspicion on Rebecca, the grieving mother. Her husband, Daniel, returned from a business trip to a house torn apart by turmoil and suspicion. Tensions had simmered between them since the birth of their son, Samuel. Medical records unveiled Rebecca's battle with postpartum depression, painting her as a woman on the edge. The detective noted her unnervingly composed demeanor, a stark contrast to a mother whose infant had been torn from her arms. A breakthrough emerged from the shadows when forensic experts unearthed microscopic fibers on the nursery windowsill, fibers alien to the household's fabric. These fibers whispered of a climber's rope, hinting at an intruder skilled in the art of ascent. The focus shifted, shedding light on a dark figure prowling in the night, captured in snippets of surveillance footage from neighboring homes. Daniel, once a specter on the periphery, emerged into the harsh light of scrutiny. Unusual calluses marred his hands, remnants of a newfound hobby in rock climbing, a hobby he had taken up in the guise of stress relief. Financial records painted a grim portrait, a hefty life insurance policy on Samuel, phone calls to a shadowy figure that ceased before the abduction. The investigation twisted deeper into the abyss when Daniel's hidden life unraveled a second family secreted away in another town, unbeknownst to Rebecca. The baby monitor, a silent witness to the night's horrors, became the linchpin of truth. Digital forensics unraveled a web of deception, revealing a hacked device, a signal tampered with to orchestrate the abduction from afar. A basement cloaked in shadows became the stage for a chilling revelation. Samuel, cradled in the arms of a woman named Elaine, emerged from the darkness, a living testament to the tangled web of deceit woven by those closest. Elaine, haunted by loss, surrendered without protest, her vacant eyes betraying a soul adrift in the currents of grief and betrayal. A tale of twisted love and betrayal unfurled a past entwined with pain and longing. Daniel and Elaine, bound by a shared tragedy, conspired in the shadows to rewrite their fates. The courtroom, hushed in anticipation, bore witness to the unraveling of a meticulously crafted facade. The enhanced audio from the baby monitor echoed through the chamber, revealing not just whispered words but the damning sound of Daniel's cough, a ghostly echo of his presence on that fateful night. In the end, justice prevailed swiftly and decisively. Daniel and Elaine faced the full weight of their crimes: kidnapping, conspiracy, endangerment. Rebecca, scarred but resilient, sought solace in a new beginning, far from the shadows of the past. Samuel, spared the memory of his abduction, grew up in the light of a new dawn. The baby monitor, a sentinel of truth, remained silent, its secrets locked away in the darkness. Rebecca, keeper of memories, tucked the stuffed rabbit away, its glassy eyes a silent witness to the night that changed everything. The monitor never lied, it whispered the truth, a truth veiled in shadows and betrayal, a truth that shattered the illusion of safety in the quiet of the night. Story 24. The ancient box lay buried deep within the layers of dust and forgotten memories in the attic of the old house, a relic left behind by past inhabitants. Among the faded Polaroids it held, capturing moments of joy and celebration, there was one that pierced through the veil of normalcy. As her gaze fell upon the final photo, a shiver ran down Rebecca's spine. In the image, a family sat in her living room, their smiles frozen in time, oblivious to the sinister figure lurking in the shadows behind them. With trembling hands, Rebecca descended the creaking stairs, feeling the weight of the empty house pressing down on her. Placing the unsettling photograph on the cold kitchen counter, she scrutinized every detail under the harsh glow of the fluorescent light. The familiarity of the setting clashed with the unfamiliar faces of the family in the picture, creating a dissonance that sent chills down her spine. Detective Morgan, a man of few words but piercing insight, arrived on the scene, his weathered leather jacket a testament to his years of unraveling mysteries. With a steady hand, he examined the Polaroid, his eyes betraying no hint of emotion. Delving into the history of the house's previous owners, he uncovered a trail of disappearances that spanned years, each family vanishing without a trace after exactly 1 year of residency. The revelation of the Sutherland family, the last known occupants captured in the photograph, raised more questions than answers. Forensic analysis pointed to a timer being used for the photo, but the identity of the shadowy figure remained elusive. As the investigation delved deeper, a chilling pattern emerged, linking the enigmatic figure to the mysterious disappearances that plagued the house for decades. In a startling turn of events, the basement unveiled the haunting truth. Beneath the concrete floor lay the preserved remains of all the missing families, their fates intertwined in a macabre dance orchestrated by a man long thought to be dead. Samuel Whitfield, the architect of the house, cast a long shadow over the investigation, his presence lingering like a ghost in the walls of the accursed dwelling. As Rebecca sought refuge from the encroaching darkness, a cryptic journal discovered in the hidden crawlspace revealed the meticulous observations of the families by the elusive figure. The final entry spoke of Rebecca, the new resident who had unwittingly stumbled upon the dark secrets of the house, setting in motion a sinister plan that threatened to consume her. Retreating to a hotel under the watchful eye of law enforcement, Rebecca's nights were haunted by the sound of a ringing phone and the ominous click of a Polaroid camera capturing her every move. The mysteries of the house remained unsolved, its dark corridors echoing with the whispers of the past and the unseen watcher who lurked in the shadows. As the investigation unfolded, the house stood silent and foreboding, a monument to the enigma of Samuel Whitfield and the families lost to his malevolent designs. The truth remained elusive, obscured by layers of deception and the lingering presence of a man who defied death itself. And in the depths of the night, new photographs developed, capturing the faces of unsuspecting families, destined to become pawns in a chilling game of shadows and secrets. The legacy of the man in the photograph lived on, a specter of fear that watched from the darkness, its gaze fixed on those who dared to seek the truth hidden within the walls of the house that time forgot. Story 25. The weathered envelope, its corners tinged with age, contrasted sharply with the pristine stamp, fresh as if just licked and sent off into the world. With cautious hands, the detective peeled it open, revealing a single sheet of paper, its words typed hastily in a jagged, uneven script. "I apologize for my actions," the message read. The paper exuded a faint dampness, a metallic tang lingering in the air, and there along the bottom edge a reddish smudge caught their attention. Not ink, but blood. Detective Sarah Morgan, her touch precise and methodical in her latex-clad hands, carefully secured the letter in an evidence bag. The forensic team's findings confirmed her suspicions the crimson stain was human blood, a match to DNA from an unsolved murder case that had plagued the department for years. The victim, Rebecca Warren, a young journalist discovered in her apartment, her life taken by multiple stab wounds. Her laptop gone, her notes scattered, a chilling tableau that hinted at a connection between her work and her tragic fate. Despite exhaustive efforts, the case had grown cold, the truth eluding them. And now a mysterious missive had found its way to the homicide division, bearing a simple address. The scant fingerprints on the paper and envelope hinted at a cautious sender, one who had taken care to obscure their identity. But the postmark, a beacon in the darkness, offered a glimmer of hope. Morgan gathered her team in the dimly lit briefing room, where the walls whispered with unsolved mysteries captured in photos, timelines, and dead-end leads. Pinning the letter's image at the heart of the board, she declared, "This changes everything. Our perpetrator shows remorse." Detective James Chen, her steadfast partner in the quest for justice, eyed the letter thoughtfully. "Or perhaps they seek to deceive us," he countered, his voice a murmur in the shadows. The unique typewriter impressions led the forensics team on a trail to a bygone model, a relic of the past now carefully sought in antique shops and collections across the region. As the investigation gained traction, the spotlight turned once more to Rebecca's life. Her editor painted a portrait of a fearless soul dedicated to rooting out corruption, a trailblazer in pursuit of truth. Her latest assignment, delving into the murky world of a powerful family entangled in local politics, now took center stage. Michael Barnes, Rebecca's boyfriend, once a pillar of support, now found himself under scrutiny. His demeanor, once steadfast, now betrayed a flicker of unease as he spoke of shadows trailing Rebecca, of threats unheeded. A second letter arrived, bearing the same telltale signs of its predecessor, the same typewriter, the same crimson echo. This time the confession ran deeper. She uncovered the family's secrets, the inheritance, the truth about the patriarch's demise. "I never meant for it to end this way." The trail led to the mansion of the deceased patriarch, where the eldest son, Richard, stood guard over a trove of antiques, vintage typewriters among them. His polished explanations rang hollow, rehearsed lines faltering under the weight of suspicion. And then a breakthrough, a microscopic clue on the envelope tying back to custom stationery owned solely by the youngest daughter, Alina. Her revelation of Richard's request for her stationery unlocked a hidden chamber in the investigation, unveiling a cache of damning evidence. Clippings, surveillance, and the vintage typewriter that had penned the fatal letters, its keys tainted with Rebecca's blood. The link between Richard and Michael, once obscured, now blazed brightly on the path to truth. Financial transactions, whispers of poison and greed, all woven into a tapestry of betrayal. Michael's confession shattered the silence, his voice a tremor of regret and fear. A final piece slid into place with Aliner's revelation, a clandestine recording of Richard sealing Rebecca's fate with chilling finality. Arrested in the midst of flight, Richard's protestations of innocence crumbled under the weight of evidence. The courtroom, a stage for justice's dance, bore witness to the unraveling of a meticulously plotted crime. Guilty. The verdict echoed through the hushed chamber, sealing Richard's fate as the architect of tragedy. Detective Morgan, a silent sentinel in the storm, approached Rebecca's grieving parents, offering solace in a sea of grief. The blood-stained letters found their resting place in evidence storage, silent witnesses to a tale of deceit and retribution. A cautionary tale for new investigators, a whisper of truth in the night. Sometimes, the key to unlocking a mystery lies not in high-tech gadgetry, but in the echoes of an old typewriter and the weight of guilt upon a killer's soul. Story 26. She desired to refresh the nursery before the baby's arrival. The walls wore a faded blue, a hue that held countless tales beneath its surface. As she applied the first coat of white paint, a hidden message emerged underneath letters, initially faint, then growing sharper, more distinct. Etched beneath the surface was a warning, "Don't let it hear you." Her breath hitched. Stepping back, she noticed something else, tiny handprints in the fresh paint, positioned too high for any child to reach. This discovery at the Morgan residence's nursery marked the start of what would later be known as the Whispering House case. The young couple had recently bought the Victorian-style home at an unbelievably low price, unaware of its dark past. Detective Sarah Klein arrived at the door, notebook in hand. A woman, her belly swollen with pregnancy and clad in paint-splattered overalls, greeted her. Dark circles framed her eyes, signs of sleepless nights. The trembling hands of the woman revealed her distress as she recounted finding the hidden message and handprints. The previous owners vanished overnight, the woman explained. Neighbors said they left hastily, with only essential items packed in their car. Detective Klein explored the historic home, the aged floorboards creaking under her weight. In the nursery, she examined the partially painted wall, where the ominous message and child handprints remained visible. Back at the precinct, Detective Klein delved into the property's records. The house had changed owners 8 times in 30 years, an unusually high turnover rate. More unsettling were the child welfare reports linked to 3 of those families, describing children hearing whispers and feeling watched as they slept. Further investigation revealed that the house once belonged to Aliner Blackwood, a wealthy widow who ran an orphanage from the property. 5 children under her care had disappeared, presumed to have run away. However, during renovations after Aliner's death, a sealed room was discovered behind the nursery wall, containing children's belongings but no bodies. Former residents shared accounts of strange occurrences in the house, moving toys, ghostly laughter, and mysterious writings on the walls. The consistent message found during nursery repaintings and the identical handprints raised chilling questions about the home's dark history. A breakthrough came when ground-penetrating radar detected anomalies beneath the basement floor. Excavation revealed 5 child-sized sets of remains, confirming the tragic fate of Aliner's orphan charges. The children had been buried with pendants bearing their names, dispelling the myth of their supposed escape. Luminol exposed a haunting sight in the nursery, countless handprints glowing in the darkness, a silent testament to the trapped souls seeking to escape their fate. Eleanor's journals unveiled her twisted motives, believing she could prolong her life by exploiting the children's energy. The case concluded with a proper burial for the victims, finally acknowledging them as murder victims rather than runaways. The house remained vacant, tainted by the sinister events that unfolded within its walls. Detective Klein closed the case, but an eerie presence lingered, as if the spirits of the children continued to reach out through time and paint. The nursery walls were demolished, yet workers reported hearing ghostly whispers emanating from the debris, refusing to return after their encounters. The condemned house became another unsolved mystery, a reminder that some crimes leave indelible marks that no amount of paint can conceal. One photograph remained with Detective Klein, a haunting image of 5 luminous handprints in the darkness, a chilling reminder of the lingering echoes of a tragic past. Story 27, renovations always have a way of revealing hidden treasures, both tangible and intangible. Amongst the old newspapers, broken trinkets, and forgotten photographs that Sarah and Michael unearthed while restoring their new Victorian-era home, one discovery stood out: a letter, carefully folded beneath the floorboards. The paper was fragile, the ink faded, but the message was stark: "Don't trust the one who knocked." Before they could process the ominous warning, 3 sharp knocks reverberated through the silent house, sending shivers down their spines. The couple had been captivated by the charm and history of the estate when they acquired it at an auction, never anticipating the dark secrets it held within its walls. Detective Eleanor Reed, with her seasoned partner, arrived on the scene to investigate. The floorboards lay open, exposing a hidden void below. With hands weathered by years of handling evidence, Reed carefully retrieved the note, already tainted by the touch of Sarah and Michael. Their genuine fear as they recounted the mysterious knocking did not escape Reed's keen observation. Background checks on the couple revealed nothing amiss. They were newlyweds with impeccable reputations and stable lives. However, the house itself bore a tangled past. Previously owned by the Hargrove family, the property had been abandoned after the passing of Margaret Hargrove, the last resident, an elderly widow with no known enemies or suspicious circumstances surrounding her death. Forensic analysis dated the cryptic note back 2 decades. The handwriting bore signs of distress, hinting at fear or urgency. Reed delved deeper, unearthing the troubled history of the Hargrove family. Franklin, Margaret's late husband, once a respected teacher with a penchant for woodworking, had spiraled into paranoia in his final years, convinced of being watched by an unknown figure. A breakthrough came during a conversation with Margaret's sister, now residing in a nursing home. Whispers of a mysterious collector, associated with Franklin's gambling debts, shed light on the shadows lingering in the house. The collector's persistent 3-knock visits had instilled fear in Margaret, driving her to consider selling the house, a proposition Franklin vehemently opposed. Returning to the property with a forensic team, Reed led an extensive search that unearthed a grim truth buried beneath the foundation. Cadaver dogs led them to a male skeleton, identified through dental records as Victor Mercer, a notorious loan shark and collector who had vanished without a trace 2 decades earlier. Further excavation revealed a wallet with Mercer's ID, sealing the fate of the long-lost collector. Margaret's diaries, discovered in the attic, provided a chilling narrative of events that unfolded in the house. Franklin's desperate act to protect his wife had led to a tragic outcome, leaving a haunting legacy in the form of the hidden note and the skeletal remains below. The case, pieced together through forensic evidence and Margaret's haunting entries, shed light on a dark chapter in the house's history. Justice, though delayed, found its way to Victor Mercer's long-forgotten fate. Sarah and Michael, unable to bear the weight of the revelations, chose to part ways with the house, leaving it empty and abandoned. Local whispers speak of ghostly echoes in the stillness of the night, 3 distinct knocks that pierce the silence, a reminder of the secrets that lie dormant within the walls. The note, now preserved in evidence storage, serves as a chilling memento of the past, warning all who dare to uncover the house's mysteries. Don't trust the one who knocked. As Detective Reed concluded her final report, she pondered the enigmatic nature of unresolved mysteries, acknowledging that some truths may forever remain shrouded in darkness, even when we believe we have unraveled the secrets of the past.